Good afternoon. Um, Always stuff to discuss sports wise. Let's do a little bit of housekeeping while we're here. Obviously, you have to be subscribed to leave comments in the chat section. So there's that. Try and keep things clean and avoid getting yourself blocked by moderators. Obviously, I have my team of moderators. So let's delve in. Right. Obviously, the Euro qualifiers are taking place. England beating Malta, and the big story out of that was Trent Alexander-Arnold being played in the number 10 role rather than a defensive role. And people have said for quite some time he's better in an attacking sense than in a defensive sense. Um, Obviously, with Liverpool, he's a wing back. Southgate and his coaching team have put him into a more advanced attacking role. He did score against Malta, and had a very, very good game. Obviously, it is Malta, so let's not take too much out of that. But we could see a trend with Trent Alexander-Arnold being converted from a wing back more to a winger or midfield or an attacking midfielder. That's quite interesting. Wales lost to Armenia, and so obviously the post Gareth Bale era. There's discussions about the direction Wales are going to take and if they're going to qualify. Obviously, the first Ashes test is taking place. England are on top currently as we are recording, although I think the weather will have an impact on the first test. Um, there's a lot of changeable conditions, humidity and thunderstorms floating around over the next couple of days. So we'll see how the weather impacts the first test in the Ashes series, although England currently are on top. So that's going to be quite interesting. Moeen Ali's obviously come out of test retirement, which is an interesting subplot to the discussion. Obviously, and he announced his retirement from Test cricket a couple of years ago. He's now back in the fold, which is concerning when we look at the depth of spinners that England have in a Test level. There is a lack of British spinners available at that level. Right. NBA news, obviously, Michael Jordan is selling his majority stake in the Charlotte Hornets. He will still retain a minority stake. I've done a video on that. It's very, very interesting that he's decided at this point to sell a proportion of his stake in the team. When he bought that stake in the Charlotte Hornets back in 2010, it was worth $275 million US. He'll be getting a fair payday out of selling his controlling majority stake in the Charlotte Hornets. Obviously, the Denver Nuggets have won their first NBA championship. The Vegas Golden Knights have won their first NHL Stanley Cup. So this is a year of firsts in North American sport. Obviously, Lionel Messi is signing with Inter Miami. That's going to be interesting how that pans out. Karim Benzema has obviously gone over to Saudi Arabia to finish his career. There's rumours linking Harry Kane with a move from White Hart Lane to the Bernabeu and to Real Madrid to replace Karim Benzema. Have to see how that plays out as well. So there's a lot of player movement. Jude Bellingham has obviously gone from Borussia Dortmund to Real Madrid in his transfer move. Alexis McAllister has gone from Brighton to Liverpool. So there's some player movement, but not as much as I think was expected. There's a lot of reports circulating that PSG may try and sell Mbappe. So PSG looking to reduce their wage bill and invest in their youth system. Mbappe moving on, where does he end up? Who can afford to pay him and afford the transfer fee expected? He could go for a lot of money. So there's that. So yeah, we're in this kind of period in the summer in the northern hemisphere where things are just stuttering along, and there's not real much discussion at this time. Things have gone a little bit quiet in regards to manager movement and player movement. It's not as hectic a summer as people would expect, but then a lot of players are away on qualification and international duty. So we shall see what happens there. Of course, we've had an accident in cycling. It's led. I've got to double check this, but there was a fatality in a pro cycling race. I'm going to check where it was. A rider has been killed. Another rider seriously injured. 3 teams have pulled out of. Just check the. news. Oh, come on, load, damn you. Let's get down to the sports. Right. Gino made a death shot, but no surprises. Cycling looks for answers. This is an article. Um, uh, this is the Tour of the Pyrenees. The Tour de Suisse. Sorry, he crashed and ended up down a ravine. Uh, the huge sense of shock in the peloton and on the team buses at the race was clear, with the figure of one of the biggest teams saying there's been a lot of tears and that riders were distraught. There's little surprise that cycling has lost a huge talent to the pressures of competition on the road, where the gap between what different riders are winning. So basically, um, pro cycling, it's been a long time since a rider has been killed in an event. Although the women's Tour of Pyrenees was cancelled early, citing again safety fears. So international pro cycling has had a week of bad headlines. Women's race in the Pyrenees cancelled partway through again because of safety fears, and now Gino Mader has had his fatal accident in the Tour de Suisse. Several teams have withdrawn from that event as a consequence, and so I mean we've seen some bad crashes in pro cycling in the Giro, in the Vuelta, in the Tour de France in the past. So that is again highlights the safety aspect. Obviously now helmets are mandatory in pro cycling. They didn't always used to be the case. Yes, the Ashes. Well, we're only on we're only in the first test. I think the weather's going to have an impact. I think England are on top from reports. They've had a very good first innings with the bat, and they're having a very good first innings with the ball. Australia, I think, are struggling with the conditions somewhat. But Brendan McCullum as head coach, I mean, his record since coming in, I think there was a few eyebrows raised when he was appointed, but the record speaks for itself with the wins and the transformation with the team, the confidence around the team. Cricket itself, though, honestly, the debate about having cricket back on free-to-air TV when it's a test series like this is still going to be there. Cricket does have problems. And this is like a golden opportunity that we had back in the early 2000s when cricket was at its peak. Between the 80s and the 2000s, cricket was at its peak with fans engaging, new fans, getting engaged with the sport, and we've seen a decline in viewer numbers, and so an Ashes series like this, I think, should be on free to air coverage, not behind a paywall, but sports rights and sports rights discussions are quite a hot topic at the moment. Obviously, FIFA have finally agreed a TV deal with the BBC and ITV here in the UK. There was FIFA were unhappy with the deal tabled by multiple broadcasters in regards to the Women's World Cup in Australia and New Zealand. Multiple European broadcasters were threatened with a blackout basically because they didn't bid enough, because the way the TV rights with FIFA are now broken down. That used to be joint TV rights bids for all tournaments with FIFA, and then they separated post 2019. And a deal has been reached. So here in the UK, at least, we're not going to have a media blackout. I won't be able to watch as many matches of the Women's World Cup as I would like because of work. However, I will try my best to watch as many games as possible. I think it's going to be a good tournament. I think the weather conditions in Australia and New Zealand at this time of year, the temperatures won't have as massive impact as let's say Qatar would have. Qatar did. There is already an issue in Australia and New Zealand about stadium availability and how it's impacting the NRL, the A League, the AFL, and they've had to rejig things a little bit. But I think it's going to be a good tournament. I think women's game has definitely come a very long way in the last 10 to 15 years. It's massively progressed. The USA are on a dead cert to win every World Cup now. I think the England women's team last year at the Euros showed how far they've come as a group and how far the women's professional game has come as well. So there's a lot of positives out of it, and England go in as one of the favourites. There, however, are still issues, and again, the FIFA deadlock with broadcasters wasn't a good look. But I'm glad I'm glad things have been resolved to a point. Yes, I do agree. If the Ashes or any form of Test cricket or cricket was on free to wear, the viewership would increase, participation levels would increase, and we wouldn't have to rely on things like the 100 to try and fix the problems that the UCB have caused over many years. Yes, the ECB does make a large amount of money out of the TV deal, but are we seeing the fruits of that? Are we actually seeing positive growth of the sport since 2005? I would argue that we're going the other way. I would argue that the Cricket World Cup back in 2019, the final peak viewership was around 15 million. Peak viewership of the Ashes in 2005 over the 5 Test series was 10 million more than that. So clearly, there's a net loss there of fans. Yes, the ECB does make a lot of money from home Test series. It does, but the 100 itself is actually a loss-making enterprise. It doesn't make money; it loses money. So while they make money out of TV rights with Sky, and they make money out of the home Test series, they're losing money in another aspect on a format they don't need or shouldn't need. And I've always said about the 100, it's a reactionary. It was a reactionary decision to try and curb, the lost fans and try and get people interested in the sport again. Is Jude Bellingham going to Madrid a good move? We shall have to wait and see on that. Obviously, Borussia Dortmund make a nice chunk of change out of the transfer. But again, you have to question Real Madrid. They're in massive amounts of debt. How can they justify this transfer when their debts are nearly €1 billion? I mean, this is ridiculous. This is where, for Jude Bellingham, he's gone from one club to another club, one big club in Europe to another big club in Europe, and he's still going to be playing at a high level. He's still very young. Hopefully, I think he had less pressure in Germany than he's going to have in Spain. So the pressure will be on him more. The spotlight will be on him more. He will either shine or he'll crumble. Time will tell whether that is actually a good transfer or not. Yeah, the ECB did. Well, the ECB did have a T20 format, and they've screwed that up with how they promote it. So the ECB have shot themselves in the foot, quite literally, because all they had to do was put the T20 competition on free-to-air coverage, and they would have had their answer to the IPL. So by making the sport less accessible and putting it behind a paywall, they're hurting themselves. If they had what they had before, with splits rights between subscription TV and free-to-air coverage, we wouldn't have the 100 because we wouldn't require it. True. Well, you say that, but our sporting culture is different. Yes. What is interesting is in India, cricket isn't the most popular sport. It's field hockey. Let that sink in. The demographics of both countries are different. The sporting landscape of both countries is different. Obviously, we've seen a lot of issues with sports teams over here having financial issues, and in part and parcel is the way the wage structures are structured, the TV deals are structured, pathways, sponsorships, and obviously there's a finite amount of money available. Um, India obviously is a bigger cricketing market. It's a bigger sports market of untapped potential. I mean, when I did the FA Cup final review, a lot of viewers were from India. So it is an untapped sports market, as I say. But their sporting culture, as I say, is different. And the population demographics are different. So when people say Test cricket is our favourite cricket, is it though? Because one day in T20 is shorter formats are a good way to bring new fans in. You don't need the 100 to do that. You just need to promote what you already have. And the ECB have done a very, very good job of mismanaging the domestic game from the shorter formats to first class county to Test cricket in regards to pathways, accessibility, TV deal for a very, very long time. So, and this is an organisation that during COVID had to get emergency loans from the government, so and then laid staff off. So it just shows how bloated the administration was. Um, in regards to Jude Bellingham, will he be another Woodgate? Well, Jude Bellingham hasn't had the injury problems that Jonathan Woodgate has had. Jonathan Woodgate, when he went to Real Madrid, injuries just hampered him. Hampered him. Woodgate still was and still is one of the best centre backs this country's ever produced. He, on his day, was one of the best centre backs in the world. But people don't remember that. People remember the fact that Jonathan Woodgate flopped at Real Madrid because he was injured all the time. Didn't have a happy stay there. A lot of players don't have a happy stay in Barcelona or Real Madrid. Yeah, the T20 Blast is quite good. You don't need that. You need to properly promote what you already have. And the ECB is not very, very good at that. And to be fair, I don't think they're really doing a good job of promoting the 100 because when they admitted it was going to make losses, and that was before COVID, and then COVID comes along, it's a loss-making enterprise. Yes, Martin Tyler is going to. Sky Sports is going through a transition with its presenting lineups and commentary lineups. Obviously, Stelling's left Soccer Saturday. Soccer AM's gone as a program. Sky's in a transition period, and viewers, Sky customers, but viewers are not necessarily sold on what could be coming in the future. We know Laura Woods is leaving Talksport and she's going on to join Sky Sports. So we know that Jeff Stelling's replacement is going to be Laura Woods. And there's a lot of crap online about she's a woman, she's not very good, all this crap. I have no problem with Laura Woods, to be honest. I think she's come a long way in broadcasting. She's developing her own style. Is she the best? No. Is she the worst? No, she's probably better than some of the male presenters we currently have. But as I say, Sky Sports is in this transition period, and BT Sports changing name. And the way BT Sport are branding themselves is new TNT Sport is same new name, same game, which basically means we're still going to be crap because BT Sport. I've never really BT Sport's been hemorrhaging money from the BT group since inception, and BT have gone. We need to get rid of this media arm. It's not working. She's got a theatre. Either way, look, she's moving on from Talksport. BT Sport is obviously being rebranded next month, and sold. So the media landscape in the UK is changing, and when we come to discussing TV rights and how much they're worth, look at the debate that FIFA, or look at the argument that FIFA's had with the European broadcasters in regards to the Women's World Cup and what they value that tournament at and what the broadcasters initially were willing to pay. So we are seeing a change in TV rights negotiations and media negotiations between major sports, major leagues, and their broadcast partners. And we'll see what plays out there. What would cricket fans in Manchester or Lancashire rather watch? Lancashire versus Yorkshire or Manchester Originals versus North? I would go with Lancashire, Yorkshire. Um, Personally, I've never agreed with the 100 format. It doesn't work anyway, personally. And when the ECB said it was going to lose money or barely break even, it just sums up how really they not really thought this through at a time when losing money is not a good idea. But the problem is, um, the ECB got very, very greedy and assumed that lots of people would purchase Sky Sports. Well, it's not just in England. It's across Europe and South America, and to a certain extent Australia and New Zealand. The history of our team sports is very, very important. As well as with developing and modernising, you need to have that community aspect and that tradition aspect there, which is one of the reasons why the North Americans love watching European football. It's one of the reasons why they are fascinated by our sporting culture, because their sporting culture is completely different. It is completely different in every single way. Um, there's a reason why there is so much North American money in our football, and why by watching and digesting our domestic leagues, um, it's led to an interest in purchasing teams and investing and sponsoring, and you now look at it, and the US, the fastest growing participation sport in the US is association football. There's a reason for that, and we could argue, the MLS doesn't do it. Well, um, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I think US sporting culture and athlete development is it's a franchise system. So the league basically says, "Do you want to buy in to a potential owner and have a stake in the league?" Basically, um, but it's also that NCAA collegiate system and junior league system, which over here in Europe and South America we have, the youth team in the club, whereas in the US they have the youth league or the NCAA, and it's a completely different sporting dynamic, completely different. And so I think a lot of North Americans find it, obviously they stumble across, let's say, the Premier League, the German, the Bundesliga in Germany, the Portuguese Premier Division, La Liga, Serie A, um, other European leagues. They stumble across the Champions League, Conference League, Europa League, that kind of stuff, because it's very well broadcast in the US. That's what's very, very important. Um, and apart, when you take out the big clubs and certainly like the big six here, which is a media idea, but anyway, what I've found very, very interesting is when I look at my data and I look at the comment section and I look at where viewers are viewing from, and some of the responses I've had, and I will respond to some comments um, going through my comments. Some of my North American viewers stumbled across my channel because of my club histories. And it's when I'm looking at some of the clubs that are a little bit more niche or a bit, haven't had the success for a long time, or they're lower league at the moment, or they're not considered one of the big, the big clubs of a league system. It's very, very interesting. Um, the fact that like my mum is older than PSG, for example, is quite interesting. Um, in fact, most of my family are older than PSG, but that's Indian. Um, but I think the American sporting culture is completely different. If an owner goes, "This location's not working, we're not making much money," I'll just move the team. I'll relocate the league. You see, team relocations historically quite regularly. Over here, it's not the case. When teams go out of business, they go out of business, like Rushton and Diamonds, for example. Third Lanark in Scotland, when they go out, and Gretna, when they go out of business, they go out of business. Um, so it's an interesting one. Will there be a 30-team MLS league before the 2026 World Cup? I believe so. I believe that there's expansion on the MLS is basically grown very rapidly, and its way of growing rapidly is through relentless expansion. Relentless. Is that the right way to grow the sport in the US and Canada? I don't know, but they've chosen a policy of relentless expansion. Now, the NHL did this in the 90s and early 2000s, policy of relentless expansion, and it ultimately led to um, a lockout, a couple of lockouts, and a player strike, and now we have a salary cap system, and the economics has completely changed. But the NHL went after a policy of relentless, ruthless expansion for a decade. And now suddenly we have two more new teams join in the last, 7 years, 6, 7 years, in Vegas and Seattle, and they've both been pretty successful off the bat. Um, so I would think yes. I would think yes. There will be 30 teams before the World Cup in 3 years' time. I'm going to have to look at expansion of the MLS again. I did a video on the MLS, I think a while ago, but I'm going to have to do another video on the MLS and its growth. But yeah, they pursued a policy of relentless expansion. Um, at some point, expansion is going to stop, and they're going to have to stabilise. And it's at that point we figure out how viable the league is long term in comparison to the other major leagues that are the big four major leagues. So we'll see what happens there. Did I enjoy seeing all the East End Londoners enjoying their West Ham team? Well, not everyone in the East End supports West Ham, but it was nice to see another club have success that hasn't had success in my lifetime. They came close in 2006 to win the FA Cup, but it's nice to see another club win their first trophy in a while and have some success. And then that lengthy spell, like Napoli winning their first league title in 3 decades. They've had success in that meantime, but not a league title. So it is kind of nice to see a team win their first trophy in a long, long time and bring success to their community and to their fan base. There's been a lot of firsts in the last 12 months for teams winning their first title or reaching their first final or, making progress. But it was fantastic. Obviously, Man City have won the Champions League for the first time. There's still question marks about their off-field finances and the ongoing investigation into them. I've seen a mixed response on social media from sports fans in regards to what's going on with that. You think the 30th MLS team will be Vegas or Sacramento? Well, Sacramento, it's been put on hiatus. Their bid. They are planning to have a team. California is a hotbed not only for American soccer, association football, but rugby union as well. California, while it has its issues as a state, with cost of living and homelessness and crime and inequality, is one of the economic powerhouses of the US alongside Texas and New York State. So a team over there would make some logical sense. But Vegas, I mean, look, Las Vegas. The Oakland A's look very likely now to be relocated to Las Vegas in the next few years. They've got the Raiders, they've got the Golden Knights. I think they want a clean sweep of all the major leagues in the US and Canada. I think they want to have a clean sweep of teams from the Big Four, Big Five. You count the MLS now as one of those major leagues that is starting to make big revenues. I think Vegas. It will be interesting to see where that 30th team gets placed, but I know Sacramento, their bid's been put on hiatus. I think it's to do with stadium issues. But the ownership group are still very, very interested in pursuing um, that MLS level, uh, and having that major league aspect to their team. Have you seen the pictures of the London Stadium being converted to a baseball stadium? Not yet, although it's going to be interesting to see how the London series plays out, considering that the lack of advertising. I'm not a baseball fan. I've made that very, very clear. Um, but I will say this: that lack of advertising and that lack of promotion so far, from what I've seen, has really concerned me. Now, I think 2019 they got their promotion wrong. I think using Jimmy Carr to promote the product was not the best idea, but they were at least were ramping up the advertising. They were spending money on promotion, billboard posters, online adverts, TV adverts, adverts in newspapers. I just haven't seen it. I have not seen it. That's not to say that there aren't adverts out there and promotional materials out there, but it's going to be interesting to see ticket sales and interesting to see the TV viewership. Um, it really is. Um, but in saying that, there hasn't been the promotion that I think. I mean, I live my life online. Like I live my life online. But I just have not seen. I've seen one advert so far for this upcoming series. So ticket sales are going to be really interesting. How many of those ticket sales are going to go to locals, like local residents? Because last time, 2019, 70 odd percent were people who lived, in the UK, either British nationals or those here with residency. 30% of ticket sales went to foreign nationals who were not resident in the UK. So it's going to be interesting to see, ticket sales, TV viewership, and what those numbers and figures look like. Obviously, 4 years ago, the cheaper tickets sold out almost immediately. The more expensive tickets and the various gradings of ticket price were harder to shift. So I hopefully they got their ticketing strategy right this time. But yeah, promotion wise, I haven't seen a lot, and that is the concern. I mean, I know what a baseball stadium looks like. I know what it looked like last time. To me, they've already got practice. It's a multi-use facility, so I can't see that being an issue. But you know, as I say, it's just going to be interesting seeing how things play out and what those ticket sales are like, what those viewership figures are like, and obviously the commitment that Major League Baseball's made up till 2026. Obviously, they're going to Paris in 2025. Um, so we'll see what happens. Yeah, the Wales result. I mean, look, it's the post Bale era, but I didn't think Wales had a particularly good World Cup. Um, Very disappointed with their performance at the World Cup. I think, yeah, it's. I don't know what you can make of that really, but there's still a long way to go in the qualification process, so it's not all doom and gloom right now. Um, as I say, things can change. Uh, Moments like this can make or break a qualification campaign, or if this was a league season. This could be a turning point where they go, "This is unacceptable. We've got to be better." The problem is they've been too reliant on Ramsey, Bale, and Allen, for example, as their core leadership group for too long. And then you have to start questioning, player development and talent depth that the national side has. And they've had a very successful period over the last decade of qualifying for major tournaments and doing well at major tournaments. The World Cup was a damp squib. However, their performances in recent Euros have been rather, positive and refreshing, and they've made some good progress. So, but there's a long way to go in regards to qualification. It's not done yet, but it is troubling that take out a couple of players from that squad that qualified for the World Cup, and the team is just not good enough. Simple. And then you have to start looking at that player development, at that youth system, at the pathways in place. Um, and this is, uh, Yeah, look, Armenia don't have the greatest history when it comes to post-Soviet era football. Let's be honest. Mkhitaryan is the only Armenian I can think of a high level of a decent standard. Now, I don't think he missed the Champions League final because he had an injury. So their best player, I don't think, has been fully fit. That's a concern. But it just sums up, you know, why has the defeat happened? Is it preparation? But here's the thing. I'm going to say this. Regardless of the result, one thing I did notice looking at the European finals, the last stages of the FA Cup was players were looking out on their feet after 20, 30 minutes. Players looked exhausted. And the end of the season being in June, like madness. If this was like a World Cup year or a Euros year, we're already playing an international tournament. So the late finish of the season, I think, has also had an impact on performances. Yeah, Ireland, yeah, some negative. Yeah, I think that players are tired, basically. Players are shattered. And that's across Europe. Players are out on their feet. And this is the argument about why we shouldn't have had the World Cup in Qatar and the disrupted season. And you know, the last few years have been heavily disrupted because of the pandemic and the World Cup, and we need to have a discussion about club football and how it's structured. I think we honestly need to. I think the fact we're finishing seasons in June should not be happening. We should not be playing club games in the first to second week of June. That is just ridiculous. Um, but we're not. Football is not the only sport having discussions about late finishing seasons. The NHL, I think, has had the second latest awarded Stanley Cup that isn't COVID impacted. Where Vegas, if Vegas had gone, if it had gone to 7 games, they're handing out their Stanley Cup in the last week of June. Um, so there's that. Must-win game for Wales away at Turkey, or it's over in my opinion. Jerry, though, need a break from football. England is a professional, of course. My thoughts on it: it's a win, it's a clean sheet. Trent Alexander-Arnold being played in a very attacking role as a number 10 is really interesting, and I think Liverpool need to take note of playing him to his strengths rather than playing him as a wing back. He's not developing as a wing back as was envisaged when he broke into the team. He's very good going forward. Defensively, he's all over the place. Playing him for he's like the English version of Gareth Bale. Started out as a wing back, transitioned more to a winger and attacking midfielder or a striker. I think that's going to be Trent Alexander Arnold's final position is going to be further up the field. I think Jurgen Klopp and his club side need to realise that and play to his strengths because I think it will benefit Liverpool also having him in a more progressive part of the field. Um, in regards, yeah, I'm also tuning out of football. Obviously, the Women's World Cup kicks off next month. Um, so there's that. There's going to be some big transfers. Obviously, Jude Bellingham is one that's starting to has raised a few eyebrows going from Dortmund to Madrid. Um, in regards to Mbappe's future at PSG, that's now up in the air. It's likely he's going to leave. And then that raises the question of what happens to Neymar long term at PSG. Does he stay or does he go? PSG have basically hinted they need to control their spending and their wage bill so we can see some player movement out of the French capital. But no, I've got to a point now with football where I think the way the last 3 years have been so congested, and the fact the season's finished so late, I think is actually having an impact on player welfare. And then you'll get those people going, "Oh, football, they're soft, they dive, they you know, they don't, they." It's you're running a marathon every game, um, pretty much. You've got to be able to have some pretty good cardio. Um, but I do think the World Cup should be taking place now, basically, or last summer, but it should be taking place in the summer rather than the winter. And I think having the World Cup at the time we did has really disrupted things. Um, but as I say, that I was really disappointed with the quality of the European finals and the FA Cup final. You know, the players did look out on their feet very early on into those games. Now, obviously, we've got this off season. Then the season starts again in August, so we haven't got long before the club season starts up again for the major leagues. And then the debate's going to be about again. We're discussing fixture congestion and the whole thing reverberates again. Um, well, in regards to Manchester City and their off-field issues, we'll see what happens there. That investigation has gone a bit quiet on the news front, and but they looked absolutely out on their feet. Inter Milan were out on their feet. They had their own cup final a few days before, much like Man City had. Um, West Ham against Fiorentina. Fiorentina had played on the losing side in that Italian Cup final. They were out on their feet. Um, I didn't. I fell asleep, so I missed the Roma Sevilla game. But by all accounts, that was a lethargic game. You know, I don't know. If they are guilty, could it could it be covered up? I mean, does it ruin their reputation? Look, the issues with club finances and the financial rules in place and the weakness of governance. This is I think the issue here is not that clubs have done it. It's the governance side of the game, and the governance has been weak for a very very long time. Um, the clubs have been greedy. The club owners have been greedy. Absolutely, the player wages are massively inflated. I always compare what a top flight player at a big club in Europe gets paid in a week or a month compared to a player playing rugby league or ice hockey gets paid in a year. It you know it's stunning how overinflated the wages are, and the economics the economics of association football in Europe are based upon debt and lots of it, and a lot of clubs are in debt. And the pandemic exposed a lot of that. And what we get is a very reactionary response by the clubs. Go, we'll have the Super League then, and but also the pandemic has exposed a lot of issues. And so we'll see what happens. What about Everton? I think that's still ongoing. That's not going to go away. Um, we'll see what happens. I think very similar to Man City, the wheels turn slowly when it comes to sporting punishments, but the wheels are turning. I think if Man City don't get punished, they can't punish Everton, or vice versa. If Man City do get punished, they have to punish Everton. But if they do that, if they decide to punish Everton and Man City, they have to go after every club that breaks the rules. And unfortunately, if that happens, then the whole structure goes out the window because you're looking at about 70% of clubs are in breach of the spending rules at any given time. And this Premiership rugby fixtures haven't been announced yet. Do you think there will still be? God knows what's going to happen with rugby union. The fact that three clubs have gone bust is there's more clubs in trouble. The fact that there's going to be lost revenue because there's three less teams to fixture for says to me that there's more clubs in trouble. Um, we're not done with teams struggling financially. But Saracens for years got away with salary cap, and Leicester got away with salary cap breaches, and they won the last two premierships. So make of that what you will. But our English people, I used to watch the qualifiers, but now they're on Channel 4 and the quality of production isn't great. And I'm not a massive fan of 4 on demand and things like that. I don't watch. Um, but I'm more of a tournament kind of fan. The qualifiers for me, I have watched them in the past, but the international footballing breaks, and yeah, I would think if you really want to engage people with the qualifiers and have good crowd numbers and good TV numbers, have pure qualifying tournaments in the summer. It's a foregone conclusion for England. Is probably what. Well, we have failed to qualify for tournaments in the past in my lifetime and before I was born. So it's not necessarily it's a given. But our recent record in qualifiers is pretty good. It's some of the issues, however, still persist with selections. I think Southgate putting Trent Alexander-Arnold where he did is showing that okay, he's copped a lot of criticism over his tactics, his selections, and how he uses his substitutions in squad. So we'll see if he sticks with Trent Alexander-Arnold in an advanced position going forward, or if he starts to use his wing backs more as wide midfielders and wingers. Uh, but he did show some attacking intent with the team. So, but it was against Malta, a tougher opposition. We shall see if he sticks with those more advanced, progressive tactics. Do I think the TV deal for the Premiership rugby is affecting the clubs? The pandemic did for London Irish and Worcester. Wasps had money issues for a long time and were well known about for many, many years that they were making losses. But as I said, there could be 6 or 7 other clubs in financial trouble. And with clubs like Exeter, who've been very successful in the last decade and a half, wanting to reduce um, their wage bills. I mean, Saracens have completely distorted the Premiership spending anyway. And But English rugby union is not the only at club level is not rugby union at club level is in a mess globally. It's not just Wales or England. I mean, even in Australia and New Zealand, the money's not there. Um, so we'll see what happens. I mean, look, rugby union in Australia relies on mercenary contracts given out to entice rugby league players over. Like Suoliti is the latest. You've had Cora Betty and Radradra. You know, have been Wendell Sailor and Lottie Takiri back in the day. They've heavily relied on mercenary talent to plug the gaps when it comes to talent production. The Super Rugby format ultimately collapsed, and we've discussed this a lot. Rugby union at club level, social media people are questioning Rob Page's position. Is that fair? No, it's not fair. It's not fair. I mean, he's limited in the resources he has. Let's be honest. The Ryan Giggs situation, he got thrust into the spotlight to take the role, but it's not a glamorous role. The Welsh national job when it comes to association football. He's done very well as head coach with the resources he has available. What else is he meant to do when his two of his best and most reliable players that he could have selected have now retired? And Aaron Ramsey, while he's fit at the moment, is not the player he was because of injuries. And then you have to look at the players they're bringing through. They are limited in resources and player base. What is he supposed to do? Also, the guy here succeeding has had all these legal issues, which has also damaged the reputation of the sport in. Um, but he has a very limited player base which he can choose from, and there's only four professional clubs at a high level, so there's not a lot he can do. Yeah, I think the late finish of the European season has a massive impact on the quality of games we've been seeing over the last month. Like I said, the European finals weren't great. The FA Cup final, well, it wasn't great. It wasn't the worst, and players looked absolutely exhausted. Players looked absolutely exhausted, and I think that when you have a squad, especially with Wales, where you're selecting from leagues from League Two to the Premiership, for example, and every club in between, you have a very limited player base of eligible players, and only four professional clubs in the English league system that play at a decent level. Because now Wrexham, you could argue, are playing at a decent level now, and been playing quite well for some time. You are limited in the resources, but look, you've obviously got to beat what's in front of you. They didn't do that, but I would argue the players are out on their feet, and it's a European wide problem. We've just literally finished the club season, and within a week we're into internationals. That is ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. That we've gone from a club. It's like when the World Cup, we went from club football straight to international football, and as soon as the World Cup was over, players are back in their club sides within a week too. Ridiculous. They basically played solidly for 18 months. 18 months solid. There's not been a lot of downtime, and people go, "Oh, but they're athletes, they're well paid, etc., etc." It's only football. It's not as if they're playing a more brutal sport, etc., etc. That's missing the point of athlete welfare. There will be players playing through injuries who, in a normal non-disrupted season, would have withdrawn from a squad, going, "I'm going to get my knee right, or I'm going to get my hip issue, or my ankle, or I've got a thigh strain. I'm going to get, you know, right for the following season. I'm going to take some time off and have some physio, maybe have a minor surgery." Players in a variety of sports are foregoing that, pushing their bodies, and it's yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, we've already got the Premier League fixtures being announced, and that's been a debate about that. Look, these players, doesn't matter what club they're playing for, have literally just finished a very grueling, disrupted season, which has had a World Cup in there, and have gone literally straight back into international squads. Whether they play in every game or not is beside the point, but we've gone from a very long, grueling, disrupted season into a international set of games, be it Nations League or qualifiers, and then we have the pre-season starting at the end of in what, 4 or 5 weeks, something like that. In a month's time, it's the end of July. It's not long. It's not long at all. We've got 6 weeks, and it's the first week of August, so we don't have long before some of these players have got to be back in camp. And if they're based in Scotland, for example, they're already playing games. There'll be players at Scottish clubs playing meaningful games in European or league competition in July. So when people go, "Oh, the quality of the Scottish league isn't great," well, there's partial reasons for that. The start of their season being one. So you've got players based in Scotland who will be playing for a variety of nations across Europe and the world, with these qualifiers and Nations League games, who will be within a month playing league football again and European games. So that's ridiculous. There'll be clubs in Scotland, including Celtic and Rangers, who will be starting their European campaigns, be it qualifying rounds for the Conference League, Europa League, and Champions League, in a month's time. Let that sink in. Um, and then we've got this Nations League format, which I don't think helps. I've got no interest in. I never have. I think it's the. I think if you're going to have competitions in the seasons when we don't have World Cups and Euros, that's when you have your qualifying tournaments in one block. Done. Play a mini qualifying tournament in your section, um, and then you have none of this crappy international break in between in the regular season. Have these international breaks, and so you actually shorten the footballing season because what we're seeing here is, as I say, in a month's time, thereabouts, some football clubs across Europe. I'm using Scotland as an example, but there'll be clubs across Europe who'll be starting qualifying games for the European competitions. So the qualifying rounds, which are meaningful games. These count towards. These are meaningful games. These players don't get a lot of rest, um, which is ridiculous. If we're talking about player welfare and making sure we can prolong careers and make sure players stay fit and healthy. And when we talk about players like a Jonathan Woodgate, whose career was disrupted by injury, and this is when league seasons were finishing in April and May. Can you imagine? Some of these players are delaying surgery or delaying physiotherapy or delaying recovery for injuries. They're playing whilst hurt a lot of the time. Like listen to what came out of the Stanley Cup, for example. The Stanley Cup finals with players playing on with broken ribs and broken sternums and ruptured ligaments and all. Look, I can do some more club histories on some more European teams from around all the European leagues, and I've actually done a little bit of research. And there's a couple of Italian clubs that have been very successful historically that are now playing in Serie C and Serie D. Which is going to be interesting when I do those videos. I've been looking at, it is starting to, and this is where we've seen in fan protests across Europe against UEFA being greedy, and this is part of it. That Sarajevo have no chance of, going on a long European run because of the way the UEFA coefficient works right now. When the Cup Winners' Cup was a thing, Sarajevo had a chance of going on a fairy tale run to the latter stages of the tournament. Their players get, big cameras on them, and the player could have a big move for a bigger club. Doesn't happen anymore. Yeah, Parma. Well, yeah, I'm going to do a video on AS Parma. That's going to be interesting. A lot of that's to do with the Parmalat um, group financial scandal, because people think Parmalat. Well, what's that? Parmalat was a massive conglomerate of a dairy firm, a meat firm, and a banking firm based in the city of Parma, obviously. And Parmalat, I remember when I spent some time in Italy, it's a very common brand of dairy products: milk, cheese, butter. You would see the Parmalat name, one of the biggest companies in Italy. You see it everywhere. And they were embroiled in a corruption scandal. And of course, Parmalat, being the main title sponsor of the team, I think the chairman owned the club, that kind of thing. The team just went bankrupt. It was a very damaging scandal at the time. And yeah, Parma, the football club, as a result, suffered and have continued to suffer for the last 15 years since the scandal happened. And there was a lot of jokes in Italy calling it corruption, the milk corruption scandal, or Parmalat corruption milk. And we had a joke as kids when we were teenagers laughing about it. And that was in the last couple of decades. This is about the same time as the Calciopoli scandal. And AS Parma have never fully recovered as a football club. From where they were to where they are now, hasn't fully recovered. And when we look at the scandals in football and all that's a big one that people forget about, is the Parmalat scandal. Yeah, AS, they haven't been the same. They have not been the same since. And we look at the Man City situation right now, and while it's the opposite end of the spectrum, because Etihad Airways aren't going bust anytime soon. But if um, the Etihad group was to have financial issues, that changes things. But Man City's financial dealings are the opposite, where they're hiding money. They're getting around sponsorship rules and they're getting around. Whereas the Parmalat scandal, there was away from football, the company Parmalat, which owned banks, dairies, processing plants. I think it had shares in supermarket chains. This big company, big industrial concern. Um, they go bust, and because they owned the football club, well, the chairman owned the football club, it obviously blew up quite catastrophically. But all these years later, the football club hasn't recovered. The city of Parma's been badly impacted job-wise, and that means less fans going to games, can't afford to go and all that. And it had a massive impact on the game. So, the Parmalat scandal, I remember that. And then we called it, and then as a joke, we called it, when we were, because Parmalat obviously was still selling milk and cheese and butter and ham and agricultural products. And so you would go to the supermarket, you would see the Parmalat brand, we started calling it corruption milk. And the thing is, their milk was really nice, their cheese was really nice, their butter was really nice. The products they produced were actually really tasty. It's just the company were bent as a £2 note. Really dodgy, like a 99p coin. It was just this is corruption on an industrial scale, and I think what we're seeing at Man City and at Everton is the opposite end of the spectrum. Can you see the top leagues in the world changing? In what sense? I think with UEFA bringing in their new spending rules, we may see change that. Now the Saudi league, I mean, look, no is the answer. Look at the Chinese Super League. There's a reason why players don't go there anymore. It's corrupt. The Saudi League is pretty much the same. No, absolutely no. Let's not kid ourselves. It's just to aid the Arabian image, the Saudi image, the Qatari image, or whatever, the Dubai. It's a political move. They're using sport as a political tool to make themselves look good. We're not going to see quality and prestige there. It's a joke. And this is what we've seen with the LIV Golf and PGA. It is literally the Saudi government with their public investment fund, basically as a diplomatic arm of the Saudi government, trying to make their public image look good. That's it. In regards to the quality, I think football as a sport is at a lower quality now than what it was 20 years ago. I've been very, very clear on that for a very, very, very long time. I've watched over the years. I've watched a lot of football. I've watched a lot of sport. I think certain sports were at their peak 20 years ago. I think football is one of those sports that I think is the imbalance within Europe is quite stark. Some leagues have suffered financially. I think UEFA, as the governing body, with how they have the UEFA coefficient ranking and the way they've structured a number of all three of their club tournaments, is partly to blame for this. I think the formats they had in the 90s were better, although the Champions League has gone through multiple format changes. But I think losing the Cup Winners' Cup and rebranding the UEFA Cup as the Europa League were two blunders. Bringing in a group stage to the Europa League was a blunder, and then bringing in the Conference League to basically replace the Cup Winners' Cup 20 odd years after they got rid of the Cup. It's the whole thing now is they're playing too many games, the players. There's too many dead rubbers in the European competitions, which no one gives a toss about apart from the UEFA and the clubs because they make money. The players are knackered. And then we see performances as we did over all at the end of the season with various teams where players are literally wobbling on their feet. And is this sustainable for the Isle of Man, Guernsey, and Jersey to fill teams in the English League? No, is the answer to that one. Quite simply, no. I think while the Channel Islands has produced a couple of players like Graham Lasso and Matt Letizia in football and Banahan in rugby union have come from the Channel Islands. Basically, the answer is no. It's not sustainable. Um, Although there is athletic talent from, you've got Mark Cavendish from the Isle of Man. Um, so there's been some high profile, sports stars have come from these locations. But in regards to apart from Jersey rugby union, apart from having like a professional setup and actually saying, okay, we're going to have St Helier or St Peter Port FC, for example, or Douglas FC, and we're going to enter. No, because the level they will have to enter at, there isn't the money coming in with gate receipts or the TV money. You'd have to have a very wealthy wealthy owner, willing to lose money for many, many years before they can actually start being profitable, if at all. I mean, the only incentive to sign players is the tax status on income tax and property taxes that the Crown dependencies have in order to sign players. But will the players be willing to relocate their families there, for example? That is a question. But look how successful the Isle of Man TT is. Fans go there to watch it. So, but they're lovely parts of the world. Don't get me wrong, I would love to go to Channel Islands on holiday. It's a lovely part of the world. A very historical part of the world, but I'd be going as a tourist for a week or two, and I wouldn't be spending a lot of time there. The only positive of going to places like the Channel Islands and the Isle of Man, if you are an athlete and if you are setting up a sports team, is the tax status, the various tax arrangements, because they're not technically part of the UK. They are separate countries that are crown dependencies. It's very weird politically. I will have to do a video on the other channel looking at Channel Islands and the Isle of Man and their political arrangements with the UK for defence. They pay for their own policing. They have their own police forces. It's on military defence that the UK is responsible, but they're not part of the UK. They're crown dependency. They actually are technically separate countries. But the only way you could entice athletes to go there and teams to set up there is because of the tax system. That's the only way you can entice anyone to go there, to relocate. And, what would the locals feel about that? People many generations of people who've lived there for a long time. How would they feel about something like that happening? Whereby you just have this sports team set up and then you've got all these people turning up. Do the locals actually feel a need for a professional team? I know we have Jersey, the rugby union side, but other than that, do we do yeah? And the population of some of Alderney is tiny. Sark is like less than 1,000 people, so you don't have a massive population in the Channel Islands or the Isle of Man. They're not massive. The infrastructure isn't there. They could be good locations for pre-season training tours, for example, like a pre-season training camp, or a mid-season break for a team, because the climate, especially in the Channel Islands, is a little bit more pleasant, let's say, than Stoke. So for a Stoke player, it might be quite nice to have a little pre-season training camp in the Channel Islands. Have I heard of the Marathi Vase? No, I have not, but I'm assuming it's something to do with the Channel Islands and their sport between the various islands and competitions. Or Guernsey, Jersey, and Alderney enter. Alderney still waiting for their first win since 1948. So there you go. Yeah. I mean, look. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think the Channel Islands obviously a lot of athletes have come from the Channel Islands and the Isle of Man, for example, as are the ones I've mentioned, who've gone on to be very, very successful in professional sport. That's a fact. That's acceptable. That's fine. But what do the locals feel about, what the locals feel? Because the infrastructure's got to be in place, and it's got to be beneficial for, the local population, the local economy to have that kind of. Do they need a professional sports team based there? Do they need it? I would think um, the locals are quite happy, just being sports fans, and that'd be that. Yes, I have heard of the Island Games. The Channel Islands is very, very interesting because you've got the French Channel Islands as well, which are actually part of Normandy, which are actually part of France. I'm going to have to do some videos on Channel Islands, you know, and have to have a look at some of the high profile Olympians, professional athletes that have come out of these locations because you've got Graham Massey, you've got Matt Letizia, you've got Mark Cavendish. Um, I'm assuming that's the island of Anglesey if you talk about Jens Mon. Um, the island, I mean, there's some very interesting, uh, you know, amateur sporting competitions where teams enter and this is I think the community aspect of sport that gets forgotten in the professional kind of landscape. That when we read the news or watch the news or watch a sports broadcast, it's more the professional where the money men are. Where the money's at, where the prize money's big. Um, but you know the amateur aspect, the community aspect of sport does get forgotten, like the Island Games. Because the sports media and the broadcast rights are very obsessed with the Premier League or the US, the Big Four leagues, or in Australia, the AFL and the NRL. They're obsessed with the top end. They forget that there's an amateur level below where some of the best talented athletes do get scouted and end up, you know, getting a professional contract. And there is that. But no, I mean, look, the community aspect of sport goes back a very, very long way. Now, the Isle of Man, Guernsey, Jersey, and Anglesey have a good record of them. I mean, look, they've obviously got bigger population sizes. You know, it's important for the local community um, to be involved, and I'm assuming that the local tourist boards really play on this and try and sell this idea of, hey, look, this is something that an event that is important to us culturally, and they sell that. But people forget that the Isle of Man is obviously famous for the TT. Um, but this is the community aspect of sport that does get forgotten when we look at the profession, sport in general. We think of the Premier League, the Big Four leagues, professional leagues in the US and Canada. When we look at the NRL and AFL in Australia, for example, motorsport, we always see the professional, the big sports, the big leagues, the bigs like Le Mans, the V8 Supercars, Tour. you know that's something that people forget about is the community aspect and the amateur aspect of certain competitions, or the as I said, the community cultural aspect of some of these things get completely forgotten because of the way the sports media operates, the way that social media operates. I bet you a lot of people don't really know about the Island Games or some of the other, regional amateur competitions like the Highland Games, for example, in Scotland, or the Cheddar Gorge cheese rolling, and things that go back a long, long way historically to the Middle Ages. Some of these competitions, because of the media's obsession with the professional sporting landscape of the top leagues and top sports around the world. Um, and that community link is often gets forgotten by um, you know sports sponsors, team owners, the media. They forget about it. No, I wouldn't have thought many people in mainland Wales or mainland UK would know about the Island Games. I honestly think it wouldn't make conversation down the local pub or down the local sports club that this competition exists. Um, if you are a tourist and you go to Anglesey or the Isle of Man or Guernsey, Jersey, Oldham, all that, and you go to the Channel Islands, you will obviously will see it advertised. But then mainland UK, I don't think you would hear much about it. It's like uh, it would be like, what is this competition? What is this sporting event? The only reason why the Highland Games get so much publicity and is well known globally is because of the links with the royal family. Other than that, the Highland Games would again be this weird cultural thing up in northwest Scotland. Um, what's interesting is Royal Fair Islands football used to take part. Again, you know, that is interesting. But bear in mind, Gibraltar's only been a FIFA ranked nation for a few years. The Faroe Islands haven't really been on the rankings either for a very, very long time. It's only been in the last couple of decades that they've got their FIFA and UEFA ranking. Um, Gibraltar isn't an island; it's a peninsula. But there we go. It's a peninsula, and it's not. It's similar shape to Cadiz as well, with the natural harbour. It's not actually an island. I'm surprised the Isle of Wight doesn't take part. That's an interesting one because the Isle of Wight's technically in this, and the Isles of Scilly. I'm surprised they don't take part and have a team represented at the Island Games. But I'm assuming that's to do with the cost. Um, but no, Gibraltar is a peninsula. Um, but as I say, like some of these cultural, things where it's regions and small communities that obviously um, have this kind of participation. The mainstream media won't be interested in this because there's no money to be made. This isn't a very profitable exercise. So the media won't get interested. The big sponsors won't get interested, because there's no money to be made in it. Um, and this is where we're having the debate about the cost of running. Look at the running costs of major sporting events. Look at the Rugby League World Cup. The French have now pulled out from hosting it. We don't know who's going to be the replacement host and if the next Rugby League World Cup is going to take place. What we know is that they, the International Rugby League Board, want 2025 to take place. They've got to find a host, and they've got 2 and a bit years to find that host. And the reason why France have withdrawn is cost. So you imagine how much it actually costs to make sure the athletes are housed in accommodation. You've got paid and unpaid officials who will be, helping with the event. You've then got to do the promotion side of it. The cost is going to be, you know, um, something that needs to be considered. On the athlete side of things, a lot of them will be doing it for not a lot of money, if any at all. And the mainstream media don't, because there's not a lot of money in it and stuff. It doesn't really register, you know, on the national consciousness. Um, and for me, that is a crying our shame. Because as I say, some of our, some very famous athletes have come from the Isle of Man, have come from the Channel Islands, and some of them have been very, very high profile and world champions and Olympic medalists and high profile, professional footballers. They've won trophies. They've competed at the highest level. And it's community and cultural sporting events like this that I think we need to promote more. It would do so much for grassroots sport to promote things like this. But um, yeah, I mean, look, the Channel Islands themselves are a beautiful part of the world, absolutely fantastic part of the world, full of history. You know, as I say, the problem is the mainstream media won't be the local media will be all over this. So the local radio stations in the Channel Islands, the local newspapers, local websites, possibly local YouTubers will be all over this social media on a local level. Doesn't make international or national news because of what it is. And in part, that's possibly to do with the cost of actually the tourist board and local sponsors promoting it. It does cost money to print, get those newspaper ads, get those online ads. It costs money. Um, and the target audience, the amount of spectators is not going to be huge. The interest on a wider scale is not going to be, in part because of that lack of look what's happening. This is what we're doing as a community. This is what we're doing as a region. But again, it's a very saturated and competitive sports market. It is. So the big sports news at the moment is the Ashes, the first test of the Ashes. That's getting a lot of media attention. We've got the build up to the Tour de France and what's happening in the Tour de Suisse and the women's Tour of the Pyrenees. So the pro cycling season is now getting up and running. We've got the Women's Football World Cup. That's going to dominate a lot of sports headlines in the month's time. So sporting events like this already are very niche and have got very limited media coverage. You're going to get even further ignored because of the big sports with all the money behind them getting a lot of coverage and a lot of media attention. But they're well worth. I mean, I don't know all the events that will be happening at the Island Games, but it's something that I think social media could do a lot to promote. If someone on social media like a sports YouTuber was to take a holiday to the Channel Islands this summer and let's say stay in Guernsey and see this and comment, or a travel YouTuber was to be in the Channel Islands, see this, and then report on it to a wide audience, suddenly you've got people talking about it globally. But the chances of that happening are slim. But look, some of these athletes that will be competing, if they're gymnasts, they'll probably be part of the UK gymnastics program, and probably will go to World Championships and Olympics. Some of the table tennis players, again, will possibly be part of a UK Team Olympic program and World Championship program. So some of them will actually be well funded and have a good level. On the athletic side, some of them will also be attempting to go to Commonwealth Games, World Championships, and Olympics. The football and rugby side, not so much, unless some of them actually have professional contracts at clubs and they're just being allowed to be released in the off season to compete. So the fact that some of these events, some of the athletes will be professional is a thing, and some of them will be, as I say, involved with national programs. If they're from the Faroe Islands or they're Scandinavian, but they live in the Faroe Islands, for example. Like I think is it Denmark or Norway that the Faroe Islands are part of? I think it's Denmark. That they're their version of a crown dependency, an overseas territory. They might get centralised government funding for gymnastics. But so there'll be a decent standard of, especially athletics and things like table tennis, for example. There will be a decent standard because those are Olympic events. Those are World Championship events. They have governing bodies and they have sponsorship deals and TV coverage. I think in this current age of social media, if the right YouTubers, for example, or the right Instagram influencers or TikTok or whatever social media platform was to be out in the Channel Islands this summer or in Anglesey or in 2027, and was just there as a tourist and sees this event taking place and reported on it to their viewership and the wider world, that changes things. But the mainstream media for a very long time ignores these type of more community regional sport doesn't get the coverage. Um, so you know, it is a shame, and there are some very talented athletes who come from these very regional areas in the UK and the Channel Islands, and the Isle of Man, and the other islands that are obviously sending teams like the Faroes, like the Islands, I would assume. Um, yeah, I mean, if the right athlete was to go, like, I'm from Anglesey, I'm a British gymnast, or I'm going to be representing the Anglesey team, or the Gotland or Ireland Islands, or Ireland. Let's say we have a world championship table tennis player from Isle of Wight, and they're very good, which is possible, and they've got a big social media following. That changes things. If the right, you know, say me, for example, let's say this channel gets big, and let's say I'm in the Channel Islands on holiday one year, and one of the Channel Islands is hosting. Suddenly, you get that global audience. Unfortunately, as far as I know, there's not many people promoting it. And that's that. This is where I think social media can help promote niche sports, or those sports that do struggle on a mainstream media platform. To gain traction, gain interest, and suddenly then the mainstream broadcasters and the newspapers and the websites have to take notice of what's happening. Um, so because if you're seen to have success on a sporting level, be it regionally in a competition like this, but that's the problem. You have to look for it. I think it will take the right social media influencer. I hate that term, but it will take the right people on social media, the right YouTubers, the right TikTokers, the right Instagrammers to be promoting the Island Games, or there's another competition for countries that have less than 1 million people, like a mini Olympics. It has to be the right social media partners. I think that's the better way to look at it. To do a piece, or upload some video clips, and suddenly you're having that discussion where the mainstream media have overlooked something like this for a very long time. Yeah, possibly after Colin Jackson, yes, because this is what I think a lot of people don't realise, is that without this community style of sport, you don't get the professional sport being supported in a sense of the athlete production, the talent pool, the grassroots. Those really talented ones getting scouted by the right coaches or the right teams to go, actually, this young girl or young lad is quite good at rugby, or rugby league, or football, or cricket. This person's quite good. This person's quite talented. Um, let's give them a professional tryout. In the opposite, let's give them a PTO contract, professional tryout. Let's give them a pay to play. Let's give them a trial and train contract. Just that one break where they get that little bit of it's competitions, and regional competitions like this, which are, I would say, similar to the Olympics and Commonwealths, just on a lower level, where you do have some world class athletes competing, but under the radar because of the media rights deal. Now, obviously, the local media will be going mad for this. They'll be in the Channel Islands. They'll be bigging it up in all the local newspapers around Anglesey and Isle of Man and the fair. They will be reporting done. Our local athlete is competing at an international event, which this is, or several of our gymnasts are, competing at this tournament, or a local table tennis player it has been selected to go as part of the regional squad or whatever. And there will be, interviews done, and maybe a radio interview, a newspaper interview, or an interview on a website, a video interview, like, on YouTube, for example. And so there's some local interest, and people are interested. But the fact that you stated you've got to search for it, I mean, look, I knew there was competitions like the Island Games that take place. There is a mini Olympics for countries, for micro states that have, I think, less than 1 million inhabitants. There's a similar international like mini Olympics, mini World Championships for those countries with less than 1 million people, where they send athletes for various sporting competitions, of which Gibraltar and the Faroe Islands do actually participate in as well, which is sort of similar to the Island Games. Um, and but again, the mainstream media doesn't cover these things because it doesn't sell newspapers, it doesn't sell magazines, it doesn't sell clicks on a website where advertisers will go, here we go. And this is the problem: is professional sport is very distorted towards certain sports and so over in the US and Canada, which is obviously where you want to sell the overseas TV rights to a football World Cup, a rugby World Cup. You want their investment in the professional sports over here. No one in the US and Canada will have any idea what the Island Game is. Not a clue. Not a clue. It's only in recent years they got interested in the rallying, for example, and the Isle of Man TT. It's only in recent years they've suddenly looked at, because of social media, the Isle of Man TT and rallying as and rallycross. It's only in the last decade and a half that they've suddenly realised, NASCAR and IndyCar, you can go off road with a car, a sedan, and go sideways in a Ford Focus. I mean, it's a thing. Archery, athletics, badminton, basketball, bowl, cycling, mountain biking, football, golf, sailing, shooting. So basically, a lot of Olympic and World Championship sports and Commonwealth sports are being competed for in a month's time, in 3 weeks. I mean, all those sports you've listed at some point have been Olympic or Commonwealth sports. So that surprises me that it doesn't have a bigger appeal, because some of the athletes competing, maybe from the Isle of Man, they could be based over in the NCAA and a university system in Michigan or Georgia or California. Because a lot of those sports, like athletics, NCAA are mad for. You know, swimming, NCAA are mad for with the US Olympic program. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of the athletes competing are over collegiate NCAA level. And they're going as part of a regional team. I mean, but the fact that, as I say, the media landscape, and when we're discussing the media landscape, when we're discussing what FIFA and the broadcasters, the impasse we've had recently, in regards to media rights and the potential blackout, that's a big thing. That's a big news story because of US involvement in the Women's World Cup. But I think we need to promote more of these events over, you know, some of the bigger sports, because the bigger sports promote themselves. And when we're discussing sport, it's like Major League Baseball. I haven't seen enough adverts to really fill me with confidence that the Major League Baseball Global Series is going to be here to stay long term. Yeah, I mean, entry list. I mean, if you've got enough athletes, you can field, in more events, and you can make obviously every event competitive. I'll see if I can actually find this Island Games. If they probably will have a live stream or a YouTube channel or people following it. It's amazing to me though that the amount of events they've got for this year's. Um, I think every 2 years, I think is fair. I think it's fair. You wouldn't want to do it every year because some of these athletes will be wanting to obviously compete at Commonwealth Games and World Championships and Olympics, and you only have a very short window in which to get your preparation right, and it does cost money. This is something that I think when people think, oh, there's the Island Games, oh, there's, people forget how much hosting a sporting event, even for a week in July, how much it actually costs. I mean, look at the costs of running an Olympics and the Commonwealth. I mean, the Commonwealth Games has been heavily criticised for, recent years because of the cost. The Olympics because of the cost. Look at the Rugby League World Cup, the cost, and we haven't even, you know, kicked a ball in the upcoming Rugby League World Cup in 2025, and already the host has gone. The second host already has pulled out because of cost. So when you're hosting major sporting events, yes, you've got the potential profit and the potential to make money, but then there's the operating costs. And then a sporting event like this may be ruinous for a host, um, because you've got to house the athletes, you've got to house the spectators. People are going to want to, come to view. So you've got fans, and because it's a lesser sporting competition with less media interest, um, you may actually end up losing money by hosting. And that's the concern, is the running costs of a competition this size. Because I don't know how many athletes will be there, and I don't know, how many fans are expected, but know, it's not cheap to run an event. And this is what we found during COVID, is when we had no fans in attendance, the losses made were ridiculous amounts of money. And at this current time, with cost of living crisis, inflation, food costs, energy costs, there's a reason why every 2 years makes sense. To do it every year would be ruinous. Ruinous. It would be very, very expensive for the organisers, and each individual island or each individual region that hosts it. It's money, 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 and money. Um, and when we're talking about professional sport and some teams making ruinous losses, this is in part is before fans have even bought a ticket, before um, you know athletes have even turned up. You've got the setup costs. You've got to pay the staff who are going to be working. It's mad. Greenland, Guernsey, Hitra. I don't know where the hell are they. Isle of Man, Isle of Wight, Jersey, Menorca. Menorca makes sense. Orkney, Saaremaa, which is in Finland, St Helena, Sark, Shetland Islands, Western Isles, and Inithmon, which is Anglesey. Wow, that's some interest. That's some countries all over the place there, or locations. I'm surprised that Madeira in Portugal hasn't got a team, because they constantly produce top quality athletes from Madeira. They've got a fair sized population in Madeira. Um, Obviously, Cristiano Ronaldo is from Madeira, but there's some other high profile Portuguese athletes that have come from Madeira. I'm surprised Madeira haven't put a team up. And I've got to do a video on sports teams from Madeira, some of the football clubs from there. Like Funchal has more than one football club that have played in the Premier League in Portugal. There's a guy I used to work with who used to play for Sporting Lisbon many years ago now. He was playing at Sporting Lisbon the year I was born, and I used to work with him. Oh God, that would be stacked. Be absolutely stacked. But one of my friend Claudio is from Madeira. I've got friends from Madeira. It's a lovely island. I want to go. I've got friends who go quite regularly. Um, but again, the cost getting a team there. It doesn't matter if you are like Greenland, which is an own sovereign state, which is owned by Denmark. Very similar in status to the Isle of Man, the Channel Islands, in being basically a Danish crown dependency rather than UK crown dependency. Very similar setup politically. It's the cost. It is the cost of transportation, lodgings. It costs money, and it's probably why the entry list varies from year to year of teams that go. Menorca has a decent population. Shetland and Orkney, they're small populations, but some good athletes have come out of the Northern Islands. So I'm wrong. Gibraltar and Faroes I still enter, but not on football GT. But yeah, but you cannot be a UEFA or FIFA ranked nation, so that's probably why the Faroes and Gibraltar no longer enter. I would have thought, because they've already governed by a different governing body on a professional level. I think that would be an unfair advantage if they were to enter because they have national sides. Whereas the other countries don't have UEFA or FIFA recognition, so they can. Because that's an unfair advantage. And plus, they'll be already doing their European qualifiers right now, so they wouldn't be available to enter a team because their best players are currently in training camp and international camp, so they can't enter, which is a shame. Um, yeah, for the level they play at, they would easily trounce the opposition, and therefore you're going to have the same gold medal game every time if they were allowed to enter. And Gibraltar's technically not an island, but that's another. I'm surprised Malta, as a country, don't enter a team, but that's an interesting one. But they're an island nation. They have Malta and Gozo, so I'm surprised. I'm surprised Crete haven't got a team. But then again, the Cretians, and the Greek Isles will probably again decimate the opposition. Um, because again, population size and quality of athletes. I am actually surprised, like Rhodes and Crete haven't entered a team. But again, it's cost. It is cost. Um, I mean, if Sicily or Sardinia were to enter a team, they would dominate. Um, yeah, look, the Faroes have come a long way, and I think you could argue that about a lot of areas sporting wise. It comes down to investment. It comes down to infrastructure. It comes down to actually having the right talented individuals coming through at the same time. Um, but it comes down to a whole variety of um, factors when a nation or a team have come a long way from where they were to where they are. I mean, look at Wrexham. It took investment by Rob McElhenney and Ryan Reynolds to get the team to where they are. Um, I mean, Sicily and Sardinia have millions. I mean, Crete, Sicily. I mean, yeah, I think they have to be a certain size. I will admit, yes, to have like a Cretan team would be ridiculous because they could just um, that would be a bit silly. But looking at some of these islands, they are small population size, so they have limited it. But this is another issue why this is probably not. I mean, this sounds like a event, fantastic event. But I think cost is one. It would be kind of fun to see if they could get a media partner like Eurosport or something like that. That'd be kind of fun because some of the athletes competing here will be competing at Olympic Games and World Championships, etc., in years to come. I believe yes, I believe all the locations listed have small. I mean, Greenland's only got like about 40,000 people living on like the world's largest island, so or even less than that. I think it's about 20 or 15. That it's ridiculously small population. I think the Channel Islands have more people than Greenland. I think that is well known. I think Faroes have about 20,000 people. So some of these locations have tiny populations that make, which is ridiculous. I mean, the Greater London is a smaller urban area. I mean, smaller geographical area than the Faroes. Yeah, has a population of 9-10 million. You know, yeah. I think there is a population limit on entry criteria. Probably why Madeira doesn't enter a team is because they have over 100,000 people living in Madeira. I think about 120,000. I think Funchal is about 70,000 people alone. So I'm surprised the Azores don't have a team. Oh look, if London was its own separate country, it will be a world class nation when it comes to sporting talent and development. There is no doubt on that. There is no doubt, and it's a variety of sports. Honestly, London has the population size to be a nation on its own. London's population is bigger than the population of Scotland, and Scotland's got Edinburgh and Glasgow and Aberdeen, which are quite sizable cities. London's huge. Um, and the fact that London can support how many professional football clubs in the footballing pyramid, from the non-league to let that sink in. Oh yeah, London's massive. I mean, Birmingham and Manchester aren't tiny by any means, and neither's Glasgow. But no, London's just on another level of ridiculousness, in size and scope and spread. But you look at how many professional football clubs London has. It could have its own league system. It's ridiculous. It is ridiculous. Um, in saying that, there is a finite limit to what London can support in regards to sport. I mean, look at rugby union having its struggles. Um, two of the three clubs to go out of business traditionally were based in London. Um, well, historically, obviously, the game is the Midlands and the Northwest is where the game is founded. The rules are written down. The first professional clubs play. I've got to do a video on the history of the English Football League. I have to do a video um, on. I think I have done a video, but I've done. Look at the most of my club histories. The majority of the clubs that I started with, I think I did. I think the only club from the founding of the Football League, I have done a video on Accrington. I've got to do a video on Accrington Stanley. Um, and they're the current Accrington Stanley and where the club are at. But I did 11 out of the 12 founders of the Football League by last year. I think there's only about 5 or 6 Football League clubs I haven't done videos on at this current time, which is why I'm starting to look at the European leagues, and I might do some more South American videos like on Neil's Old Boys, and I've done Boca Juniors up to 2018. That video is dated, but I've got to look at like River Plate, Independente. That's in Argentina. You've got Neil's Old Boys, Tigra, River Plate. Is it Belgrano? Rosario, Central. There's loads of them. There's Santa Fe. There's loads, and then you've got ones in Uruguay and Brazil, like Santos and Corinthians, and then you've got Juventud in Uruguay. There's so many. So they've got the Mexican ones as well to look at. There are a lot of. I've done the majority of the Football League and the Premier League at this point, so I'm running out of English clubs. I've got a lot of Scottish clubs still to do. Penarol, they are ridiculous with the amount of silverware Penarol have won. But I've got because I've covered most of English football at the professional level, from the top 4 divisions plus most of the National League. I'm running out of clubs I can do videos on where I'm going to get viewers interested. Um, oh God, look, I think there's an Everton football club in South America. It gets silly. It does get silly. I could look at CSKA Moscow, Spartak Moscow. I could look at Red Star Belgrade, for example, Dinamo Zagreb. You know, I've got to start looking at you know uh, other clubs basically, and other leagues, because there are some fantastic clubs across Europe who've been very successful domestically, and then you've got to look at the Swiss league's really interesting because that's ridiculously competitive. The Swiss league is stupid competitive. Yes, you've got Barcelona in Ecuador. You do. There's a couple of Juventuses. There's some ridiculous club names. Absolute ridiculous club names. There's 2 San Martins in Argentina playing in the same level, in 2 different cities. With if you put their full names together, it's different. But yeah, there's some ridiculous. Oh God, Sacramento Republic club history. It's not very long. But no, there's some ridiculous club histories I could do. When I say ridiculous, it's like why my Boa Vista video I did really well. Really well. My Boa Vista video I did the other day. A lot of Portuguese viewers were like, "This is amazing! Someone's looking at a club in Portugal outside the big three. Most Portuguese fans hate the big three. Blah 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 blah." That did really well. Um, I have not done Club America. No, I haven't. I've only done one South American club, and that's Boca Juniors. So I think it is time I start looking at some of the South American clubs and having some fun. Trying to pronounce Portuguese and Spanish names, and Probably. We'll find out when I do videos on, let's say, Sparta Rotterdam and AZ Alkmaar, and my Scottish videos have done quite well, and I haven't done videos on Rangers or Celtic yet. The Scottish videos I've done, I mean, my Ross County video is one of the most popular. I think my St Johnstone video, my St Mirren video, and my Ross County videos did quite well. My Inverness Tally Thistle video did quite well. My Aberdeen video that I did quite well. So I do think yeah, a lot of Scottish football fans are getting pretty bored with rain. I mean, give us a good idea when I do my Hibs video. When I do Hibs and Hearts in Edinburgh, we'll see what the viewership is like. So I think that will be a good litmus test if we do look at Rangers and we do look at Celtic. And we'll go from there. My Partick Thistle video did reasonably well. I've done Motherwell. That did decently. And I know a lot of my Scottish subscribers. I know I've got Kilmarnock fans and St Johnstone fans who follow and St Mirren fans who subscribe to the channel and have left comments in the past. So it'd be interesting to see when we look at some of the other clubs in Scotland outside the old firm, what viewership is like. Hey, I haven't done the Hibs video yet. I haven't done the Celtic video yet. So in the fullness of time, dear children, we will get to Hibs and Celtic in the fullness of time. But then we can look at, there's some Norwegian clubs I want to do videos on. There's some Swedish clubs I want to do videos on. Danish clubs, clubs in Finland, more clubs in Germany, because I have an affinity for Germany. I love German football, so I love the history of German football. So there's some clubs in Germany I want to look at. There's some clubs in Austria I want to look at as well. The Swiss league is fantastic. The Italian league is fantastic. Some good clubs in Italy to do some history. I mean, I was looking at Italian clubs yesterday, and I found so many I want to do videos on that are playing in like Serie C and Serie D and Serie B. We'll just be head blown and people what? There's some more clubs in Spain I want to. The New Saints. I mean, oh god, the New Saints. I mean, talk about making Welsh football uncompetitive. Um, I could do a video on the New Saints Football Club. I mean, I'm not sure how many people want to watch that and how many people care about that, but we can have a look at it. You know, there's I can do some clubs in Scotland that just I want to do videos on Falkirk. That's going to be interesting. Livingston's going to be another one I want to do a video on. I've done Partick, so Queen's Park is going to be, I think, the closest club to the Coliseum. Well, Lazio and Roma share the same stadium, so Roma and Lazio, because they share the Stadio Olimpico. So they are the two closest clubs to the Coliseum because they share the same stadium. And I have been to Roma. I can state that for a fact that Roma and Lazio, they share the same stadium. It's like Inter and AC Milan share the San Siro for now. Traditionally, that wasn't the case, but they share the same stuff. When I do the Lazio video, the reason why AS Roma exists is a merger of three teams. The reason why Lazio still exists is they refuse to merge to become AS Roma. And there's political reasons behind that to do with the old dictatorship of Mussolini and the Italian army and fascism. Yeah, Milan's interesting because their rivalry is a love-hate one. The Milan derby between Internazionale and AC. It's a furious rivalry, but it's not quite the same as Dundee United or Everton Liverpool, where it's a bit more friendly. There is an element of hate there, partly because of Berlusconi and his ownership of AC Milan for many years. But that's an interesting rivalry to look at. Both clubs hate each other but love each other at the same time. But look, there's so many clubs in Italy I've got to do videos on, like Atalanta. They've got fantastic history. I've got to look at, Sampdoria. They get forgotten a lot. You've got Genova, you've got Bologna have got a good history. Modena have got a good history. Fiorentina, obviously. Perugia is another one. Torino. Um, Dundee. In theory, you could in a week watch both clubs play at home. You could, and they're going to be in different leagues. So Dundee might play on the Saturday, and Dundee United might play on the Sunday, and you could watch both clubs in the same weekend play at home. In theory, I don't know in practice the Police Scotland would allow that, but in theory you could. And you might have fans, you might go and watch both, yes. Because Dundee and Dundee United will be, well, they've just swapped places. One's got relegated, one got promoted. So in theory, yes, you could have both home games on a Saturday and a Sunday. So yes, you could watch both in the same weekend. Who knew? But no, but I am looking forward to doing uh, looking at some more Italian clubs because there's some fantastic clubs, like fantastic clubs. Um, Bologna is going to be an interesting one. Fiorentina is going to be an interesting one to look at. Sampdoria, all their success happens in a 4-year period. Sampdoria win all their trophies in a small period with Vialli and Mancini, the driving force behind them in the late 80s, early 90s, and then it's one and done. Um, when did a Dundee team not appear in? I don't think that's ever happened. There's always been a Dundee team in the top flight, and it's been a while since they've both been in the top flight. But there's always been a Dundee team in the top flight. It's always a thing. There's never been not both Dundee sides. I think there might be one season where they were both outside the top flight, but um, I've got to check both club histories now. Yeah, I've got to go look on my notes. I don't like going back over my notes many months after doing it because I've got 4 or 5 different notebooks and I'm halfway through this one, so I don't like doing that. Means I've got to archive stuff and go through stuff. I mean, have you seen my apartment? I mean, there's shit everywhere. I do think I think there might be one season where they were both outside the top flight, but I can't think of it. That might have happened, but I think Dundee have always had a team in the top flight. It's like Glasgow have always had a team in the top flight. It doesn't matter if it's Celtic, Rangers, or Partick, or Queens Park. I mean, Queens Park are the oldest, I think, the oldest club in Scotland. So, and they were the most successful club in Scotland until about 1910, 1912, I think Queens Park were. I think you're right with Celtic and Aberdeen, although I think Motherwell, since they've been in the top flight, they've been relegated out of the top flight. And I've done videos on Aberdeen. I'm going to have to look at my notes now, and I have to go back through multiple years' worth of notes. I don't like doing that because I'm very crap at keeping track of things. I mean, I've got holiday forms and I've got all sorts of paperwork all over the place, and I don't keep track of things. So I don't like having to dig through. I have books. I have notebooks. I have notebooks all over the place. I think I'm on my sixth note. I mean, I've gone through so many of these. Not bad for a couple of quid. I've got to get some more. So far in this one, we started on the FA Cup fourth round, Brighton Hove versus Liverpool, and then Wrexham Sheffield United was the first page of this notebook, and then we had Derby County West Ham, and then we had the Six Nations first round between Wales and Ireland, and then England Scotland, and then Italy France, then the replay between Sheffield United and Wrexham. The video that I did on the NHL ratings in the USA being down 22%. The World Cup Challenge, my history on Borussia Dortmund, my history on Schalke, VfB Stuttgart history I did, then the John Motson life and career video. Then we got the Barnsley video and the Challenge Cup second round. I missed the Challenge Cup. I won't be watching the Challenge Cup to the final, to be honest. Six Nations Wales England game. Dundee FC. Here we go. Talking about Dundee. Yeah. No, I just put down their honours, the fact they were merger of two clubs in Dundee, their Scottish Premiership honours, Scottish Cup, Scottish League Cup, Scottish Challenge Cup. So yes, Dundee were outside the top flight in at least 1990-91 season, 94-95 season, and 2009-2010 season, because they played in the Challenge Cup final. So that's quite interesting. The Dundee United video, what did I do with that? Dunfermline, that's another video that's in this notebook that I've done. France, Scotland, Six Nations. Looking back at the collapse of ITV Digital, do you remember that video? Yep. The FA Cup fifth round, Fulham Leeds, which obviously Fulham. I fell asleep in that game, by the way. I seem to remember. So I didn't actually. I fell asleep. I woke up. I'm not going to bother now. Then my terrible NRL seasons of North Queensland and the Penrith Panthers. My review of the first round of the NRL. England-France game in the Six Nations. Notes there. Second round review of the NRL. The Scotland Ireland game, one of the big videos on the channel in recent months, that's exploded. Then the preview of the fifth round of the Six Nations. You've got the Scotland Italy game, the France Wales game, and the Ireland England games from the fifth round of the Six Nations. They did quite well viewership wise. The FA Cup quarter final between Sheffield United and Blackburn. Because we were on TV, we lost 3-2. We were winning that game 2-1. Then we got the 2002 NRL season of the Bulldogs. FC Cologne history video. That's back in March. That video is back in March. I remember that. Looking at their history. Brief look at the Gaelic Athletic Association. That was quite a good video. There was a lot of notes for that. A lot of notes. Then you got the West Tigers losing streak to start the 2023 NRL season. Obviously, they've won some games since then. The NHL expanding past 32 teams. This is before the Arizona vote and the Tempe Arena being not voted for. Leicester City sacking Brendan Rodgers. Chelsea sacking Graham Potter. The brief history of Croke Park, which is a bloody long. There's 2 pages of notes. The Alexander Mitrovic ban, the FA wanted to repeal that and have it a longer ban. Top 10 countries where viewers are from, which has now changed significantly since I did that video. 2011 NBA lockout, that's quite a long one. There's the NFL will London never host a Super Bowl notes. English football clubs who owners from the USA. That goes over to 2 pages, that one. The Golden Knights Winnipeg Jets preview. Obviously, the Golden Knights have won the Stanley Cup. The FA Cup semi-final between Man City and Sheffield United. You've got the Sutton United history video. The Crawley Town video. The Athletic Bilbao video that I did. The Villarreal video. That did quite well. Top US states for channel viewership. Top towns and cities for channel viewership. Those lists would have now changed because of the last couple of months. Top 10 European countries. I did that one quite recently. That's quite an interesting video, that one. I think Portugal now jumps up into that top 10. Valencia video, the history of Valencia, and the history of Valencia. They survived this season from relegation. There's the Stevenage video. There's a Hellas Verona video. That was quite a good fun one to research. They've got some very interesting facts about them. The Cagliari, they got promoted this season. Cagliari back to Serie A with Claudio Ranieri. He cried when they got promoted in that playoff game. He burst into tears when they got their promotion. There's the history of Napoli. That was quite a fun one to look at. There's the Rochdale video. Obviously, they got relegated out of the Football League. That's another one. Notts County getting promoted back to the Football League. Hull City. There's another video there. Obviously, Pochettino getting named as Chelsea manager. The Women's FA Cup final, that was only a few weeks ago, where Chelsea beat Man United with that penalty. That's Sam Kerr goal. You've got the Motherwell video. Motherwell, 1886. They joined the top flight 1893. oh no, Football League, sorry, been a top flight club since 1985. So they've been outside the top flight multiple times. So yeah, there's that one. There's the quick look at the London um, Major League Baseball games. The AS Monaco video, that was quite interesting to do. A lot of people viewed that one in relation to their club histories. Longest suspensions in NRL history, that was a fun video to research. That took some time. The FA Cup final, which was 2 weeks ago, so we're only going back 2 weeks ago, which is a fair few pages to go through. Man City, Man United. Career of Zlatan Ibrahimovic, that was fun. Zlatan's video, that was fun. 2 pages for Zlatan. Yeah, Zlatan, he gets 2 pages, so that's how important Zlatan Ibrahimovic is. The PGA LIV Golf. Just a few notes just to say that this is the thing. The Europa Conference final between West Ham and Fiorentina. Not a very good game. Lack of notes obviously is telling. The Ross County video, that's done quite well. The Ross County video, that was fun. As you can see, a fair bit of notes there. AS Roma, that's their notes. Sevilla, that's their notes. Boavista, that's been a quite popular video in recent days. The Champions League final between Man City and Inter Milan, again, you can see it wasn't a very interesting game. Major League Rugby, the history of. A fair few notes on that. And then you have taking the NHL will take games to the UK again. The pandemic video, impacts sports. Real Sociedad. That's obviously a recent club history. And then, of course, we've got the Michael Jordan selling his majority stake in the Charlotte Hornets video. So that's what I've done since, I'm going to say February this year in the notebook. I've got a lot of other notebooks floating around. I've got a couple over there. One up there. Black book on the table. There's a blue one down there. So there's a fair few notebooks that I've got my grey one, my original notebook, somewhere in the flat. I've got to find it, but yeah, these are quite handy, especially when you're doing the club histories and player profiles. Like the Zlatan Ibrahimovic takes up 2 pages. Some of the club histories are like half a page. Zlatan is a full 2 pages in the notebook. That's how. So yes, Zlatan Ibrahimovic. Even when you're taking notes, there's players and then there's Zlatan. I didn't mind Zlatan Ibrahimovic, to be fair. I think sport needs characters like him. At the right where sport is over the last 10, 20 years, athletes have become very robotic when it comes to their media appearances and their interviews and their personalities. They're very robotic. Um, yeah, I know. Like I know Zlatan probably. He was one of those athletes that you want to interview. I would love to interview Zlatan Ibrahimovic. Just to hear what he has to say about his career and the evolution of the sport, how much football has changed from when he breaks through in Sweden and then with Ajax to when he retires with AC Milan. How the sport has changed in his time as a player. But Zlatan probably would say 2 pages. He probably would. He'd probably say I deserve 20 or 200. Yes, absolutely. But I think the video I did on Muzzy Is It, I think, is in that notebook underneath that pile of books just up there, that little black notebook. Muzzy Is It was less than Zlatan Ibrahimovic. And he had a very long career, sorry. I think my Earl Crabtree rugby league career video. Yeah, no, I've done a video on Muzzy Is It's career. What I find interesting is career videos on players don't do very well. The club histories do better than the career videos. You've got to be of a certain age to remember. I mean, some of the videos. I mean, I've got to go through some of my notebooks, but some of these career videos, you've got to be of a certain age or of a certain sporting persuasion to go. Tony Cottee, I could do a video on Tony Cottee. I've seen him play. Not my favourite player, but he definitely was a hard-working player for West Ham. So if you're a West Ham fan, Tony Cottee would be a brilliant video but that will only appeal to really West Ham fans. Muzzy Is It would only really appeal to Leicester City fans. Leon Osman would only really appeal to Ugo Ekiog, yeah, you've definitely misspelt his name. Um, Obviously, sadly passing away very, very young, but he would definitely be a good career. I watched his entire career. It was fantastic. Fantastic ambassador for the sport. Fantastic box to box midfielder. Very versatile player. Shaka Hislop would be a fun career video to do. Shaka Hislop would be a hell of a lot of fun to do. Shaka Hislop. He's brilliant on ESPN. He's fantastic as an analyst. He's got a great sense of humour, very well spoken, and he's got Shaka Hislop makes me crack up. He's so funny. Jimmy Bullard is another player I do a career profile on. Michael Owen's World League Soccer first football game I played. I'm a Michael Owen. Have fun. Oh god, that was dreadful. It's a dreadful video game, but it shows how even all those years ago, it was very important that sports athletes and sports leagues realised very, very quickly how marketable they were. How no, seriously, the fact that Michael Owen has the charisma of a stone and has none, but these video game companies uh, very, very quickly realised that they could sell even more of their product, their video games, if they got the right sports star, like Brian Lara's cricket. Fantastic. You've had Tiger Woods with the golf games. You've had, I think, obviously with the FIFA games and the NHL games and the Madden, you want to be the player on the cover. You want to be one of the players on the cover, and that resonates with fans many, many years later when they're my age, their 30s and 40s. But I remember buying this game because I remember getting really interested in the sport, having choosing this guy as my favourite player because he was on the video. It's like I stumbled across. I'm on a group on Facebook to do with the NHL, and someone posted NHL 2005, the cover, and then they next to it Dan Cloutier, the former Canucks, and I think he was Rangers goaltender. And this guy goes, this guy became my favourite player because Marcus Naslund, his teammate, was on the cover of the game. So the video game manufacturers and the various sports and the various sports leagues realized very, very early on in the 90s and the 2000s, we can market their image and sell more products because this is like a superstar of that sport. So when we talk about Madden or we talk about the N2K games with the NBA basketball, when we talk about FIFA, you want to be that player on the cover, or those players. I remember one FIFA game that had 4 or 5 players on the cover. I think it was 2004. Might have been 2003 or 2004 FIFA. I've still got one of them on my PS2, which I'll probably plug into the TV at some point and have a little go on. Get the old memory card out, load up Tranmere Rovers. Yeah, I mean, there was one FIFA game where you had about 4 or 5 players on the cover. Um, I remember Shevchenko being on the cover of one. I remember um, you want to be that player, and it depends on the market you're in. So if you're selling it in the UK, it might be David Beckham back in the day. If you're selling it in Italy, it might be Edgar Davids. That was a thing, or Cannavaro, or I think it was Henry and Ronaldinho. I seem to remember. I've got the game somewhere. I figure it out, but these are the marketable players. Obviously, Messi and Ronaldo in more recent years have been very, very marketable. They know their brand. They're very and this is what sells to casual fans or kids who then become fans. This is one of the reasons why association football or soccer, as it is known in the US, is now the fastest growing participation sport. Is they've definitely realised the global image, especially with social media, that some of these high profile players have, and they market them really, really well. Now we can argue, obviously, the issues that FIFA have had with TV rights and video game rights and wanting to make as much money as possible. Yes, yes, it was, and I remember playing it religiously. I think it's the best FIFA because you get the second tier of every other league pretty much, and then you get the full football. I think it was the year that the Football League rebranded from the old division to the Division One to the Championship. That was when the Football League had its rebranding of League Two, League One, and the old Division One become the Championship. Um, and that one had, yeah, it was Henri and Ronaldinho. So you had two players on the cover. Um, and that was not long after Ronaldinho's obviously done his antics at the 2002 World Cup against England, and Thierry Henry being part of that Invincibles side. So these were household names at the time. These are two of the best players of their generation at that time. Oh yeah, fantastic! Yeah, Kasabian, I think, was one of the uh, one of the bands. Kasabian, yes, I remember that. That was a fantastic game. Um, that's 19 years ago. I got that game. I still played it up until 2020. I still would get it out, dust it off, put the disc in, play. Um, and that was fun. That was fun. Yeah, I loved that game. But yeah, 19 years ago. Jesus, that it just shows how far um, the game has come, or how not far the game has come. Maybe would be a better way to look at it. How limited certain sports games are with the controllers you have, and with what you can do. But yeah, the you know the way association football has definitely sold itself with the branding and using high profile players. And I mean, I had the World Cup game as well, and I had the Euros game, I believe. So the way that the sport has branded itself, and it's grown massively from where it was 20 years ago. It's far bigger now than what it was then as a sport. Whether the quality is as good now as what it was then is up for debate. Um, but I have to admit, some of the players of that era playing were fantastic. We had some fantastic players. I mean, if I get that game out now and look at the squad lists, you start the season when you're in the transfer market and you look at the players that were under contract at that time, um, and how Buffon is still technically playing, and Ibrahimovic has just retired 2 decades later. It's ridiculous. But some of the players that Sergio Ramos is in that game. I think was Sergio Ramos playing for Seville at the time. He wasn't playing at Real Madrid, but Sergio Ramos is in that game. Messi's not. There's something for you. Messi is not in that game because he was still in the Barcelona youth team. But yeah, Ramos is in the Sevilla system at the time. I think that was his first or second season as a professional player. So he was still, I think, a teenager, maybe 20 years old. It is ridiculous how far the sport has come. The MLS was obviously a lot smaller then than it is now for number of teams. Um, True, there was, but no, I think you could get a trophy celebration. I think it depended if it was on PS1 or PS2. I had it on PS2, so I think you could get a trophy celebration. I do think, um, but I thought the game was fantastic. But I can't believe that was 2 decades ago. I had that game. I still do have that game. Um, I think you can get the trophy celebrations because I managed to take Tranmere to win everything. I just said I'm going to choose Tranmere Rovers today. But clubs like Accrington Stanley and Yeovil hadn't made it back to the well, Accrington Stanley and Yeovil hadn't made it to the Football League at this point. So I think Yeovil got promoted to the Football League a season or two after, and Accrington Stanley got promoted in 2006. So Oxford United was still in the league. But no, that was a fantastic game. Oh yeah, I always used to choose like a team like Tranmere or what other team did I play at that age? I would always choose a team in Italy in the bottom of Serie B for star rating, and then take them to Serie A and immortality. I would choose a team in. Um, it was always also buzzing to play as Cardiff as they were never in it. Well, true. Yeah, I mean, obviously, as I say, a lot has changed since in the last 20 years, and we can look at that game and look at the squads then, and the changing football kits from like one title sponsor to many title sponsors. Because look at clubs now, there's at least two or three sponsors on the kit. So the way um, clubs have chosen their sponsorship agreements with sponsors and where they position the sponsors on the jersey and a whole range of things. F1, FIFA one loved that game, played it on PC. Maybe was yeah. They've had. This is, I think, where EA gets certain things right and they get certain things wrong. Um, Over the years, they've done some great things, but the FIFA game series with EA Sports, there's a reason why they've had to change the name of it and the branding, and it's FIFA and EA. It's to do with money, and FIFA as the governing body, obviously they give the licensing agreements and the same debate about the TV rights between the domestic broadcasters in Europe and the Women's World Cup. Money, um, it's money, and I'm not sure that. No, it's still going to be the one game. Pro Evo Soccer still exists. It's just to do with the FIFA name. I think FIFA has realised. I think we've reached a point where like, FIFA would have to find another um, video game publisher to make a game, and the cost associated. Honestly, it's just to do with the naming rights. That's it. It's still going to be the same gameplay, just without the FIFA name on it. Yeah, but Infantino's basically a younger version of Sepp Blatter. The corruption within FIFA is still there. Um, I've got to do a video on his FIFA still as corrupt under Infantino. I've got because I believe it is. I don't believe the changes necessary to FIFA have happened in order to make it an organisation that is more transparent. I don't think it's happened. I don't think Infantino is the right. I mean, some of his statements during the World Cup. Um, when Infantino was like talking about the women and disabilities, and he goes, "Today I feel disabled," and that has now become an online meme or an online like piss take, or people have edited that, and it was just like, what planet is this guy living on? Um, he was part of the FIFA organisation as basically Sepp Blatter's assistant for many years. He's from the same region of Switzerland as Sepp Blatter. He's from the next valley down. He's from the next canton. He's literally, just around the corner from where Sepp Blatter. Uh, who was the other one? Who was the other one? Well, at the moment, it's Alexander Serafin's in charge of UEFA. It was Platini who was the crook. Serafin's the new guy, but Platini was the one at UEFA who was dodgy. But again, um, we are at a point now where the sport has grown massively. We can all agree on that. It was already massive when we were kids, but it's grown massively. And in part, the growth of the global game, you go back to the 60s and 70s. So the 66 World Cup, the 1970 World Cup, that's when FIFA and UEFA start getting big. And the game starts growing and growing and growing and growing. And then what I call the real modern era, the satellite TV era of the 90s, USA 94, the sport explodes. The sport absolutely explodes into the newer markets, the growth, the dominance it has in the media, and so much money's coming in that unfortunately, because of that influx of income, which isn't evenly distributed, where there's a lack of transparency. We end up in 2015 with the FBI investigation and the Swiss prosecutors investigation, and all these years later, it's those discussions are continuing. I remember the final one. You'll say went down. Well. I don't think it went down badly. I just don't think it was the best quality of play. But look, we're talking from a British perspective, where there was only the Republic of Ireland qualifying, um, and so England, Scotland. Did Scotland qualify? I think Scotland might have qualified actually, but because England wasn't there, the media attention was a little. It didn't. It was more like majority of the UK is a neutral, for example. I know obviously John Aldridge was very famous with Jack Charlton on the touchline. They want to get him on as a sub. The FIFA officials not letting them on to make the substitution. It's 40 degrees Celsius heat plus, and John Aldridge goes bananas on the touchline. Jack Charlton goes bananas on the touchline, and that is one of the takeouts of that tournament. Diana Ross in the opening ceremony, when she can't kick a ball straight in high heels at the massive goal and she misses. Was it the worst tournament? No. Was it? Could it have been better? Well, we'll find out in a few years' time when the USA co-hosts 2026. Like honestly, the where the sport has gone since '94 is obviously the 2010 World Cup wasn't great. Italia '90, no, that was different. I'm too young to remember Italia '90. I was only 6 months old, but a lot of people speak very fondly of Italia '90. I think, how did you rate Qatar? I didn't think it was too bad on a playing standpoint. I think the weather was slightly cooler than anticipated. There were issues with the tournament. It wasn't bad. I didn't think it was the worst. I didn't think it was the best. I think I would put it on a level with the, the 2018, 2014, 2018. It was decent. I think I'll put it on a level with the Brazilian World Cup. I think it was better than South Africa, and better than USA '94, but below France '98 and Germany in 2006. It's one of them where it's subjective. I think the quality of play was pretty decent. I think goal scoring averages are up. Definitely. I think goals per game average is up. I'm going to have to look at the goals per game average since Italia '90 till now, for World Cups. I think that's going to be very, very interesting, looking at the goals per game average, and then working out how much it's gone up by, because I think 2018 we only had the one goalless draw in that tournament. So definitely goals per game average is up. This World Cup, yes, we had a few more goalless draws, but we had some high scoring games. So that mitigates the goalless draws. So I think goal scoring is up from where it was, let's say, in 2014, the 2014 World Cup. Definitely up on the 2010 World Cup, where that was a not the best tournament. But obviously, a lot of us went into the Qatar World Cup with these preconceptions, and I think we're all guilty of it. Um, but I think, was it the best? No. Was it the worst? No. I'm sort of saying it was pretty average. Um, but saying that, obviously, I've watched every World Cup since 1994, so obviously I've got a lot of previous tournaments to base it on. And as a kid, when you're watching, you think everything's fantastic. As you get older, you absorb the information differently. You absorb the spectacle differently, and when you're analysing, matches and tournaments, you once you've reached your early to mid 20s, you can say, "Well, this is good, this is bad," and you can sit there and like going back to 2018, look at the amount of notebooks I've got. I mean, I've got one, two, three in my eyeliner, and there's two more floating around. Then I used to have notepads, like pads of paper, which after they've used them up, those notes get chucked. Don't need them anymore. Although I should probably catalog them, but then I wouldn't have enough room. But I've got at least 5 notebooks in the flat that go back to 2018 till to now. And I would say, in comparing 2022 with 2018, I think 2018 was a better overall tournament, but the final in 2022 was better than the final in 2018. So that's an interesting one. But the goals per game average was higher in 2018 than 2022. I think there was one goalless draw. I think it was like 7 goalless draws. And then in 2014 we have some. We have a storm warning. I think tomorrow is going to be the day that the southeast gets it. Then we've got some thunderstorm warnings for the beginning of next week. We've had nothing here today. This time last week it was a thunderstorm, so we've had nothing here today. But I think this time tomorrow, I will be filming stuff in the garden, going, my strawberries and mint are getting destroyed. Although my strawberries are nearly ripe, I think some of them are ripe. My mint is growing fantastically. My neighbour's raspberries are growing really well. Their tomato plants are growing really well. I think we're going to have some good crop of fruit and veg in with me and my neighbours. I think the strawberries are nearly ready to be picked. And we're not doing them in a grow tunnel or anything like that. We are literally just in a big plant bed. We've got some of the plants aren't ripe yet, some are, so they're coming in stages, which is really interesting. So we're going to have more strawberries coming in about a month's time, 2 months' time. So they're growing really, really well. My mint's just fantastic. But no, we've not had any, we've been lucky today, but I know the further west, storms coming in from the Atlantic and from the southwest. Then there's a storm coming in over. There's 2 weather fronts basically. It's weird how the weather's working, but basically it's coming from the south, basically, either from the southeast or the southwest, and they sort of hit the humid air, the hot air we've had. They bring some damp humidity, warm humid air hitting dry hot air, and then it's going to be like this, I think, all summer. I think we're going to have these short, sharp heat waves and thunderstorms. So the next 2 to 3 months is going to be like this consistently. I think we're going to break temperature records. This is the earliest we've had a 30 plus degrees Celsius day for 20 years. I think, 2003. I remember 2003 in May. I think we had some 30 degrees Celsius days. I remember the summer 2003, bloody hot. But consistently, it wasn't like spiking at 40 degrees. It was just hot. It was above 30 for a long time. It was very dry. Remember that summer very vividly. And it was hot then. There was a heat wave in. I was over in continental Europe that summer on holiday, and I remember it was impacting the cricket. I remember that because I remember that. Who were we playing that summer in the cricket? Was it South Africa? I think it was South Africa or the West Indies. England were playing, or Bangladesh. I can't remember. One of the Test series. It might be New Zealand. I know we played Zimbabwe at the beginning of the cricketing because I remember that was Jimmy Anderson's first Test match, and I was at Lords to watch his first Test wicket on day 3 of the first Test, and he took a load of wickets in that Test match in both Zimbabwe and innings because we enforced the follow on. I remember that, and that was in May. That was the middle of May, and then it just got bloody hot. And then I went to Italy. I think was it June or July. I went to Italy with my stepdad and my mum and my brother, my half brother. We went over, and it was bloody hot. I remember that. And the valley we were in, there was a forest fire or grassland fire further down the valley, and I remember seeing the helicopters come over with the water and the sand and the dirt dumping it, and they were flying in a very circular pattern. They were going to Lake Trasimene, or Lake Trasimeno as you turn to it, Lago di Trasimeno as they call it, which is the biggest lake in Umbria and Tuscany, massive lake. And they were filling up and then going to these areas and just dumping fresh water. They were just doing it on a shuttle. And I remember at night we would go down to the town, have a meal in the local town, which is a beautiful little town. Had a pizzeria on the little road, and there was a waterfall. It was just fantastic. It's a beautiful little. I'll have to go there again. Bagnone was the little town. Beautiful place. Mountain roads, but we would spend a lot of nights in the villa. We would go down to the local shop. We would buy some pasta, tomatoes, hams, cheeses, all these kinds of, and then we'd have a meal in the evening. And at night, you could see the fire on the horizon. You could see the glow. There was loads of them. And I remember in Paris, Metallica, because I've got the Metallica live album, Some Kind of Monster, which came out that year, and that has the Paris live show. And it was 500 people in Paris died that day, and it was the hottest day Paris had seen up to that point. And Metallica were playing live in Paris. I had the album, and yeah, it was bloody hot. Yes, I have. I have been. There was an earthquake when I was out in Naples on a school trip, and of course Vesuvius is across the bay, and we're in. Was it? Where were we? Ah, bugger, not Salerno. It's Oh shit. My geography has failed me now. It wasn't Sorrento. I was staying in Sorrento, which is just south of Naples, just north of Salerno in Campania. Because there's a couple of bays. You've got Bay of Naples, um, Sorrento, little bay in Sorrento. There's a little peninsula, and then you've got Salerno, where the Allies landed in southern Italy in 1943 after they had landed in Sicily and they fought their way through up to south of Rome. And you can still see all the battle pot marks and where the Germans were and the Italians were, and their front lines, and the Allied US and the American, the US and British soldiers coming up. Very interesting. And we were out there, and obviously Vesuvius was obviously due to blow up, and we couldn't climb the top of Vesuvius. We were meant to go on a bus trip up the top of the mountain, and it snowed quite heavily, so they had stopped all bus trips up the mountain. We went to the Phlegarian Fields volcanic complex where there's a couple of small little volcanoes in this super volcano basically vent. But there was an earthquake. It was like a 4.5 point something spike us up, and I woke up and the bedside light in the hotel was vibrating a little bit. I'm like, okay. The Bay of Naples could explode at any time. There's a volcano there. There's a volcano out. There's a couple of volcanoes. You've got Vulcano and Stromboli just north of Sicily, out to sea. You've got Mount Etna. I was like, okay, there could be a volcano within a 100-mile radius that could explode at any time. We could be trapped and not able to get out of southern Italy because we could die. And we were on. It was interesting, but it wasn't a massive one, but it wasn't small. It was enough to wake you up and cause the building to shake a little bit. You know, okay, there's a massive volcano there. There's two volcanoes just out to sea. You've got the Bulgarian Field, which is a super volcano, which has Potswolis, a big crater, and then some other um, geysers and hot springs. You think, okay, we're in a very seismically active area. We could all die. This could be fun. I've been, yeah, I've been in Italy where earthquakes have happened, and you feel them. You get woken up when you tell, what was that? But not one that's claimed life. Let's just say moderate earthquakes where it shakes like that and it's just done. That's basically what it feels like. It's like that and it goes. That's like a 4.5, 5.5 kind of earthquake. There's a little bit of shaking for a little bit. And, okay, nothing. Check everything. Okay, nothing. No books have fallen over. No lights. Okay, fine. Let's check the kitchen. Okay, one cracked plate's not the end of the world. Key British jokes. Were you on drugs? No, I was on a school trip, so we were drinking cheap wine. Uh, yes, I've been. I remember as a kid, um, I was going with my mum and my sister. We were going to a family friend's house. They have kids similar age to us, and we were only saying a short journey. And a tree, 5, 6 cars in front, gets hit by lightning and fell over. I was at college once when my college building got hit by lightning, and then a tree behind my mate's house blew up because it got hit by lightning and took out 16 houses. And then obviously all the lights went out, building shook. That was in October 2007, 2008, 2007, 2008. I just remember it because all the lights in the college went off, building shook violently, and then another lightning strike literally hit behind my house where I was living at the time, blew up a tree and scattered bits, blew up 16 houses were damaged. And I walk home, and there's the fire brigade and the police. I'm like, what the fuck's going on here? And they went, where are you going? I said, I live at next street. I want to go home. I've been sent home from college, and there was bits of tree in the road, and the police were like, "Where do you live?" I said, "Well, where I live over there." And my nan, I was with my grandparents at the time, and my nan was like, "What's going on?" She said, "No, he lives with us," and we had no power for, I think it was about 10 hours. We had no running water and no power. And then later on, like a summer or two later, I was clearing the garage roof, and this Wellingtonia pine, this redwood that exploded. Some of the saplings were growing in our garage roof, which explained why our roof was leaking. There's a reason why sporting events like golf and like motorsport get suspended because of lightning storms. So when you watch NASCAR, for example, and they go, right, there's a caution, we're going into pit lane, there's a thunderstorm nearby, we're reducing the speed and we're having a yellow flag or red flag moment, and we're suspending the race. There's a reason. I remember in the build up to the 2014 World Cup, England were playing Honduras in a warm up game in Miami, and there was a thunderstorm nearby, and they suspended play for a period of time. It does happen um, because of all the radio, the TV equipment, and golf is one that it happened at Augusta this year. They had a tree, a couple of trees fell over. There was some thunderstorms, and they had to suspend play for a while. It happens quite regularly. I would say not playing golf during a thunderstorm would be recommended. You've got a nice bit of metal in your hand that's very conductive, and some golf courses don't have trees. Some of the links courses in Scotland do not have trees. You'll be the tallest thing around when you're swinging that golf club. You're going to get hit. Um, but even though we see it, we've seen it with major sporting events where they've had to suspend play because of a thunderstorm, where there's a lightning strike within a few miles. I mean, I've got the weather app and it tells me where the nearest thunder lightning strike is. So when I was filming that, I mean, admittedly, it wasn't the best footage. I do admit that. When the thunderstorm was happening last week, where I was in between, there was one to the south and one just to the north, and I was sort of in between the two, and you could see where the storm fronts were, and you could feel the energy in the air. The thunderstorm I filmed at the end of last summer, I think it was September, when we had the arc lightning, and it was pitch black. I said, can't see anything until the lightning comes, and then it just shoots across the sky and lights up the screen. That was literally right above my block of flats. If that was a sporting event, we are suspending play um, until there's been a period of time where there's not been a lightning strike within 5 miles or 5 kilometers. I believe it happens. I must admit, I love watching a thunderstorm from the house. Yeah, I've got some footage of some. There was one live stream in 2018 when I was living with my grandparents where there was a thunderstorm just to the north, and it was like really hot. And I just got the laptop, picked the laptop up, and I stood with the laptop in my hand, and you could see the thunderstorm behind and the massive pops over the to the north, which would be over Oxfordshire and Bedford and Buckinghamshire in the South Midlands. You could see it behind, and there was another one I remember quite vividly. Went on for about 12, 14 hours, just constant storm after storm after storm kept coming in, and I remember it um, quite vividly. I think it was in 2014. It might have been in 2015. I can't remember. I had work the next day, or I had to go somewhere the next day. I had to see some friends, I think. And there was another one, 2016. I went to my friend's memorial up near Oxford, and I was on the moped at the time, so I rode up there. And on the way back, a friend of mine on his motorbike had engine problems, and I had engine problems as well. And it was an electrical storm. There was no rain at the time, and I got home. And the following morning, the storm was continuing at like 3 in the morning when I'm going to work, and I had to go through some very flooded roads that basically killed my Aprilia. I got it fixed. It was still a bit poorly off it, but I got it fixed. So I've seen some pretty massive ones where I've been outright. There was one, one friend's memorial I think it was September or August 2016. I had not long been riding, and it was the first time I was going to be riding home on roads doing my by myself. So I went with my friend anyway. And we were riding through an electrical storm, and you could feel the humidity and you could see it, but it wasn't raining. It was just like, um, and that was an experience, I tell you. It was a fun experience. It was nerve wracking, scary, but at the same time, it was fun because it was the first time I had done it. But when we got back to Bracknell, where I used to live, and we parked up outside the supermarket, to get some, food and drink and fix my mate's engine problem and fix my engine problem because I was overheating. He had lost a cylinder. He had a B twin. He had lost a cylinder and I had an engine problem as well. I was losing power. I was overheating. Anyway, you could feel the humidity, and again, you could see this lightning storm nearby, very similar to last weekend, but it wasn't raining. It was bloody humid. And then I went and worked the next day, and steam was coming out my engine. I went through a few flooded roads. But no, I've been out in some thunderstorms. Personally, I don't mind them. Um, I've been in my house where lightning's hit the house. I've been in my aunt's house where it's killed all the power and sent my cousin shooting across the living room. That was in the Alps in Italy. That was a thunderstorm back in, I think it was 2008, 2009. I've been in some thunderstorms where it's the building I've been in's been hit. Um, that's at least 3, 4 times I've been in a building that's been hit by lightning. That's why we have lightning conducting rods and earthing rods that go in the ground. There will be somewhere on the building there'll be a conduction rod that goes in it, earths everything, or they should be. But I've been in some buildings that have been hit. It can be quite scary. It can be quite fun. But no, at the moment, across not just the UK, but across Northern Europe, Scandinavia, France, Germany, Denmark, Holland, Belgium, there's a lot of storms popping up, and the humidity is just going to happen all summer. We're going to have this from now until September, October. We're going to have thunderstorms on a constant, regular basis. And I think the temperatures are going to be hotter this year than last year. It's like my nan's funeral on Monday. That's why I did the video in the morning. I forget what video I did on Monday morning, but I went down with my sister. We drove down to Weymouth. So I'm in Berkshire, that's Dorset. When we got to Bournemouth, from Bournemouth to Weymouth, Dorchester, there were signs up saying no barbecues, no campfires at the campsite. And it was 80-90% humidity, not a cloud in the sky. And when I looked at the weather forecast like this time last weekend, about okay, there's a high chance of thunderstorms over the southwest where I'm going. I thought, shit, it's going to be one of those days where my sister doesn't like driving on the motorway very much and doesn't like driving in bad weather, which is fair. And it was the complete opposite. It was so physically draining, the weather. And it's been like it all. It's been like it since before the thunderstorms last week, and we're going to happen. And I think that will impact the cricket. I think when we, well, I know we got a bit off topic a little bit, but yeah, the weather can have an impact on sport. And I think the conditions right now, while England are on top in the cricket because of the weather conditions, with the way the ball's swinging and the spin bowling and all that, Stuart Broad's taking a few wickets, and the Australians aren't enjoying it on the batting side of things. I think they did pretty well bowling, but they're not enjoying the batting side of things. And that's fair. England are the home team, and they've got home conditions to whatever. The humidity is mad, and I think I walked down the shops earlier, and I was like, okay, I'm wearing my tank top and shorts. I was melting, and it was a bit overcast. I didn't even need my sunglasses. I didn't even take my sunglasses with me. I just walked down the road with a baseball cap. So I think the weather conditions are going to impact not just the cricket, but the British Touring Car Championship going forward, the British Superbikes. So when we've got track conditions, we saw it affect Le Mans with some of the accidents at Le Mans because of the thunderstorms coming through last weekend. I only caught bits of the Le Mans 24 hours, which is a bit annoying, but it had an impact on that. There were some crashes due to weather conditions changing. There were thunderstorms and rain at various points, including overnight, which led to some accidents and retirements. We've seen weather impact, various sporting events. So I think, yeah, these hot, humid conditions are going to have an impact on the rugby league, on the Challenge Cup, for example, on the cricket, and conversely on the Women's Football World Cup in Australia. It's their winter. We've seen a lot of rain in the Southern Hemisphere over the last year or two, so we could see adverse conditions in the Southern Hemisphere. The Women's World Cup is on. The Rugby World Cup, when it kicks off in, I think, September, we're going to see, I think, similar conditions to what May was like, where it's getting slightly cooler, but humidity's still there. We could see some thunderstorms over the French, over France, over the French region of Europe. So it's an interesting one. It is an interesting one. Um, but there we go. Um, I haven't yet, but bearing in mind what I have seen discussed is more to do with the TV rights negotiations between FIFA and the host broadcasters in Europe. I think it was 5 countries where FIFA were threatening to black it out. Because I do follow the NRL though, and I do follow Australian sport, and I have the NRL website subscription. I have seen some advertising for it. It's a big thing with their media networks. But I think now that the TV rights in the UK at least have been resolved for next month, I think we are going to start seeing some advertising. We will see some advertising ramped up. But it's again, basically haven't seen much advertising for their London part of the global series for these 2 games, and just over a week away. So that's a concern for me. But again, and I live my life on YouTube, so I'm a bit surprised by that. But we'll see what happens. We'll see how things play out. But I'm going to call that an evening. I'm going to sort my dinner out. It's going to be a nice burger, nice Rustler's burger. We'll see that's if I lasted the peak. Not sure if a bit of both. I felt cricket had been building for a while, and it was very popular in the 70s and 80s. But the 90s and the 2000s, England went on a downswing for a little while. They weren't very good, but they were building for that. The ECB realised a lot of sponsorship, advertising, a lot of coverage. Bang, 2005, and then the ECB goes, Sky Sports, please. So we could have continued to see massive growth. Anyway, I'm going to call that a down live stream. I'm going to get some more video prep done for some more football club histories, and I'll have some more content for you guys very, very soon. Bye for now.